The story begins with what seems to be an inquisition. We see a man sitting on a throne, a woman kneeling before him, some orcs on guard, and in the background, a meat grinder. You get the picture. The man on the throne says he's come here in good faith, wanting to take the first step toward peace. But not to judge a book by its cover, the look on his face doesn't seem like someone who's into peace. He's pulling petals off a flower one by one. Could he be thinking about destroying the world? All I know is he's sitting there on his throne, super relaxed, while the woman kneeling in front of him looks terrified. Behind him, the entire city is burning. This guy is definitely not here for peace. People below are watching in horror, but the woman up front is even more shocked. She says that 6 other cities were during the rebellion besides hers, even the demon lord, who would need time to conquer them by brute force. However, she's a noble of the empire and has significant political power, meaning she could get them to surrender without spilling a drop of blood. The demon lord agrees she might pull that off, and she smiles like she's convinced him. But this is when it all goes wrong. He calls her by name and asks if she really intends to betray her own people. If she wasn't wearing brown pants, she's definitely wearing them now. As he stands, he asks if she really planned to do that. Christina, surrounded by orcs, starts to freak out again. She's grabbed while the demon lord keeps talking. He accuses her of being a leader who isn't protecting her people, but just trying to save her own skin. Sounds like a typical politician to me. The demon lord shouts for everyone to hear and bends over backwards so much I thought he'd snap. He tells the people that their leader is sacrificing the lives of all the elders, families, and children for her own sake. Everyone is scared except for a couple of kids who don't understand a thing. He continues shouting that they can never trust these leaders because they're disloyal, and their best option is to trust him since he's fighting on the front lines against this woman who only cares about herself. This was one of the best political speeches I've ever heard. If I heard this, I'd vote for the guy, demon lord, for president. Brother, his speech was so epic that people started crying. He asked the crowd to join him in purging all this rot from the world, and gets so deep into their heads that they start shouting his name, Dantalion. But let's just call him Dante. The one was handcuffed and taken to the meat grinder. I don't even need to explain what happened next, do I? All I know is that everyone starts going nuts while the orc holds the woman's head. It's like a mannequin special effects, you know? Out of the 72 demon lords who rule this world, the usurper, ranked 71st, the weakest of them all, is also our protagonist, Dantalion Akadante. But before we get there, we need to go back in time to when young Dan was still in the dumps, and I mean seriously messed up. He wasn't always a demon lord. In fact, he was just a regular human who hated his father. So many people grow up without fathers, and this guy hates his. He constantly wished his father would die, and one day he did. Careful what you wish for. Kids, sometimes wishes come true. The kid's father was a criminal. You could tell by his sleazy mustache and that shifty look in his eye. Besides being a crook, the guy was a womanizer. The anything goes type. You get on blondes, brunettes, Asians, Brazilians, and secretly, even men. Besides that, he was someone who really liked money. I'm almost identifying with him. But it was his son who got screwed over in this story. Probably because of his father, he didn't have a life with many friends, but at least when the old man kicked the bucket, he left behind a nice fat inheritance. After packing up the place, Dang wondered if maybe his dad knew he was going to die, but who cares? Really, it's already morning. The sun's starting to come through the curtains. People are heading off to hell, or I mean work. And our protagonist is sitting there drinking his morning coffee, chilling, watching them go. Now that his dad's gone, he's going to live the life of an heir, or better yet, the life of a slacker. The inheritance his father left behind came to about 500 million yen, which is about $3 million. While lying comfortably in his bed, he thinks that maybe in the end his dad wasn't so bad after all. That's a son for you, wishing his dad's dead and then celebrating when it happens. With that amount of money, you could buy a house, a car, and women. Wait, women? Well, it's Japan, so maybe just a virtual girlfriend. But he's not interested in any of those things, at least that's what he says. But look at that face of his. Until something he'd been eagerly waiting for arrives. Wasn't his virtual girlfriend? All I know is the guy moves so fast that the delivery person didn't even have time to finish his sentence. He didn't see a fit, just a blur and then gone. He leaps onto his bed, dying of happiness, and we can see that this protagonist is a man of the people. Even with enough money to buy whatever he wants, the only thing he really desires is the dream room. You know that thing every guy wants? Once you build the dream room, you'll never leave. It costs a total of 30 million yen, or about $3.2 million to build. So for that kind of money, you at least expect a robot maid that makes coffee. In his life, the protagonist created 3 commandments. Do not work, do not have friends, and do not get married. I get the part about work and marriage, but the no friends thing, let me explain why. Work, well, I don't need to elaborate. It's a pain. Having friends means you have to go out to eat. There's always some kind of macho competition with anyone who works with you. I don't understand this macho competition thing. And marriage, promising to spend the rest of your life with the love of your life seems like a bad idea. His dad had the love of his life at least 12 times. What can you do? The guy was the last of the romantics. His only goal is to lie around all day playing video games, which is honestly the dream of any average guy. As he puts it, that's the very definition of luxury in paradise. Finally, he can focus 100% on the game he's been progressing through. 2 months go by. He's got a bit of a beard now, and it looks like he finished the game. It's cool that he's happy. But when they show the state of his room, the dude's living in a garbage dump. I have no idea how he managed to accumulate that much trash in just 2 months. And like any good addict, as soon as he finishes the game, he starts looking for another. No time to waste. Got to platinum the entire Dark Souls series. But while he's searching for another game to play, he hears a notification from the game that's still open. When he looks at the TV, the system has a new message for him. Dan finds this odd because he hadn't signed up for any social system, but the notification is from the game's admins congratulating him on completing it. I've read Manhwa where the protagonist gets a message from the admins, and it never leads to anything good. It kind of makes sense. People put in hours to make this game. He gets another message asking him to answer a few questions, which already smells like a scam. The first question is whether he prefers cute girls or mature women. Like you, everyone listening to this, I didn't get it either. But if I had to choose, I'd go for mature women. You could leave your preferences in the comments. The protagonist chooses one of the options, but doesn't show which. The next question is even weirder. The system asks if he gets excited by hitting or getting hit. Man, I don't know what's up with this system. Is it trying to hit on him? After that, a barrage of questions comes in, and even the protagonist is getting sick of them. But the last one grabs his attention. He asks if he knows the game's ending. It's kind of obvious. He finished it, so he says yes. Then another message asks if he would be able to change the ending. Even the protagonist finds this suspicious, and he thinks it's a scam and tosses the controller aside. After he answers that question, they'll ask for his money or tell him to buy another game. My advice to you is to keep your room clean or else you might get cockroaches. When it comes to cockroaches, even the toughest guys can't handle it. He's so disgusted that he jumps back, but by coincidence, his hand lands right on the controller, clicking the notification. This chain of events was like something out of a Saw movie, and when I say Saw, I mean deadly. The TV starts to shine really bright, and he can't even keep his eyes open. Then all light goes out, and he's not in his room anymore. As he's first regaining consciousness, he wonders what happened, looking at his hands, or rather, looking at someone else's hands. I have no idea how he figured out these weren't his hands, considering they were wearing gloves, but I guess living alone for so long makes you really familiar with your hands. The problem here isn't just that his hands are different, his whole face is wrecked. Someone did a number on him. He feels pain in his abdomen and collapses while a man talks to him. This man asks for the location of the treasure, and if he doesn't tell, they're going to get even more brutal. The guy beating him up calls him a demon king, and this is where things start going downhill. He can't even run away because his left leg is completely broken. It's time to kneel and pray. The guy isn't giving him any time to think. He wants to know where the treasure is, and if he doesn't talk, the rock over there is going to break him into pieces. Man, the rock is everywhere, even in Japanese manhwa. The protagonist obviously has no idea what they're talking about with this treasure and Demon King stuff. He's lost like a blind man in a firefight. He doesn't know what they're talking to him. He doesn't know where he is. He has no clue what's happening. In summary, he's there messed up with a bunch of guys who look like they want to rip him apart, all while asking about a treasure. I have a feeling that if they don't find the treasure they're looking for, the protagonist will be the one to release it. All he remembers is that he was at home playing video games, and then he ended up here. But he decides to ignore that for now and focus on surviving. As I mentioned, running is out of the question because his foot is messed up and his body is so battered that he feels like he's going to pass out any second. He starts using all his brain power to come up with the best plan, thinking of getting some information. He asks why they're calling him the Demon Lord, but I think that was the worst idea because one of the guys grabs his horn and asks if he's got amnesia from all the beatings. The horns give away his identity. He's the Demon Lord Dantes. At that moment, the protagonist is in shock. He starts remembering what happened. He's inside an RPG where the heroes go on a journey to defeat the Demon Lords, a super tough game where you die countless times. The storyline isn't exactly cheery either. After all, the world collapses at the end of the game. And for Dante, it's even worse. He's trash, considered the weakest among all the Demon Lords. To give you an idea, he dies in the game's tutorial. After recalling all this, he realizes that he's definitely inside the game as one of the crappiest characters there is. You could tell by the look on his face that he's in deep trouble. Dan's trying to make sense of the situation, but he gets punched in the face, snapping him back to reality. He realizes that if this continues, he's done for. The blonde guy talks to his group, and we see how many people are nearby. He's in a situation where there's no way to get out alive. The poor Dan starts getting beaten up. He admits to get rid of his father and thought he lived a comfortable life, but now he's on the brink of death. When he's almost losing consciousness, he starts to see a man sitting at a table in the distance. As the man gets closer, he realizes it's his father, laughing at the whole situation. This makes him remember a similar situation he once lived through. In the past, he was kidnapped because someone had a grudge against his awful father. At the time, the kid just didn't care whether he lived or died. Even the kidnapper was a bit shocked at how calm the kid was. When he got to the kidnapper's cabin, he made a pretty bold bet. A guy pointing a gun, saying it was real, and Dante simply told him to shoot. If it was real, he'd win, because he'd get rid of his father. If it was fake, he'd lose because he had to stay there. This kid needed some serious psychiatric help, but as you might have guessed, the gun wasn't loaded. Man, the kidnapper was so shocked by the kid. It's probably the first time a kidnapper got scared of the kidnappee. The guy was so scared, he surrendered to the police and got arrested. But after all that, Dan finally understood that survival belongs to the strongest. I don't know where he got that idea. I don't get if the author wanted to make the character badass all of a sudden. The only thing I know is that he's currently on the ground totally beat up, while a bunch of buff dudes are eager to get his treasure. The blonde guy asks again where the treasure is while placing his foot on Dan's head. He's already died once, so he decides to handle this however he wants. The blonde guy, having given up on getting his treasure, says he's not very patient and tells the rock to finish him off. The guy walks him holding this giant meat tenderizer mallet. He even asks if they're sure they want to kill him because then they won't know where the treasure is. But the blonde guy couldn't care less and says they'll find it without him. The rock holds the mallet like Thor, and as he's about to crush Dante, the protagonist calls out for him to stop. The guy pauses with that massive mallet in midair, and just that tells you how strong he is. So the protagonist is going to have to use some tricks to get out of this. The blonde guy is thrilled that he's about to learn where the treasure is, and Dante, the battered, stands up with a look of rage in his eyes. He's going to survive no matter what. I have no idea how he stood up when his foot was messed up, but let's roll with it. He looks at everyone and says he's going to reveal where the treasure is. The rock is happy that he's finally given up. The plan is to take his cash and bring him to some boss. The problem is that Dante is going to say where the treasure is, but even he doesn't know if there actually is a treasure. He also can't just point to a random spot because they'd probably kill him on the spot. So he starts his little act. He kneels and says he's been completely defeated and that his treasure is in the Demon Lord's chamber. But the treasure is hidden by magic. and only he knows how to undo the spell. You can see from everyone's faces that they don't really buy the story, and for a second, it looks like he's about to get cut in half. But it turns out it was just the blonde guy giving him a scare. He says that if he's lying, he'll die on the spot. The protagonist, with a cold look on his face, says he understands completely. Honestly, I have no idea what his plan is. Even if he takes them to the boss's room, he is the boss, so I don't know how he's going to get out of this. All I know is that the guys are thrilled to find out where the treasure is, and the protagonist on the ground is glad he's managed to overcome this first obstacle. But the real battle is just beginning. At this moment, they can't kill him. But things will change once they reach the Lord's chamber. He's going to have to come up with a plan to get out of this situation. The tricky part is that they keep asking the Lord to walk faster. Technically, he shouldn't even be walking, considering the state of his leg. The leader realizes that Dante is just stalling for time and tells him to move faster if he doesn't want to die. This guy is probably the leader of the group. The protagonist knows that sooner or later he's going to die, so he has to figure out a way to kill him before they kill him. Either way, it shows his foot again, and it's completely fine. Either it's a continuity error or the protagonist has super regeneration. But even if he does, it's still 10 people against one weakling, and he definitely can't handle them all at once. He looks around wondering if there's anything he can use, because this is Dan's castle. At least a few monsters should be around. The blonde guy tells him to hurry up again. Honestly, he doesn't care about Dan since he's going to kill him as soon as they get the treasure. Now I'm wondering, the bald guy wanted to capture him and take him to their leader, but this guy is saying he'll kill him. Again, either it's a continuity error, or they're not even in the same group. Guy who was observing the cave and noticed that it only has monster remains. It doesn't seem like any of them have died recently. It looks like he really can't count on anyone's help, and how to sort this out on his own. He wonders how much time is left until they reach the Lord's chamber, and thinks it would be much easier if this were a real game. And he sees something ahead that makes him pretty excited. The Eyes of Zeus, an ability used in the game, is now in front of him. He can see the entire map of the cave, its difficulty level, and where the enemies are located. The guy breaks into a hopeful smile, realizing that he can use the in-game abilities. The Eyes of Zeus is an OP ability that can reveal the location, position, items, and traps within a dungeon. It's a high-ranking ability that's only available in the latter half of the game. So you might ask how he can use this ability. During the tutorial, they unlocked all the overpowered S-rank abilities. That's why he can use them here. Up until now, he was annoying that he became Dante, but it turns out to be quite handy. Looking at the dungeon's characteristics, he realizes there's no troop support available, but he gets his system notification allowing him to buy troops. A Slying costs 4 pounds, a fairy is 8, a goblin is 12, and a golem is 20. I initially thought he'd buy 10 golems and make them fight, but his total budget is only 100 pounds. That's tricky. He would richer in real life than in the game. It seems the rules have reversed. Even though he can't buy as many golems as he can still use them cleverly. He comes up with a risky plan with a 60% chance of success, but he has no choice but to bet his life on it. And man, the guy is fully embracing the role of the character. He looks at them like a real demon lord would. For his plan to work, he first has to gain their trust, but there's something he needs to test first. He uses another in-game ability, Apostle of Aphrodite, which lets him see the attributes of his enemies. While he's analyzing them, the blonde guy tells him to walk faster and points his sword at him, but he maintains his act and pretends to be scared. But it's all just an act because the real counterattack begins now. Apostle of Aphrodite is a high-level skill that allows him to see the status screen of other players, which is usually hidden. Now that he's checked all the things he wanted, all he has to do is decide where to go and how to gain their trust. This blonde guy has turned around about 15 times to tell him to move faster. He said he was impatient, but I didn't realize he was that impatient. Now that he can see his status screen, he discovers this guy's name is Leaf. Overall, he's a low-rank adventurer with only C-rank wisdom. Another interesting thing about this ability is that it allows him to check the target's recent thoughts. For the protagonist's plan to work, he first has to earn Leaf's trust, even if it means taking a few risks. The guy is now determined to kill the adventurers, not even just to survive. They continue walking through the cave, and Dan notices some bones on the ground. As the first part of his plan, he shouts for everyone to stop walking. Barak looks at him in shock while Leaf asks what's happening. Dan apologizes for stopping in their way, but it's because there are several traps ahead. Leaf is nervous and unsure whether to trust this information, but Dante keeps walking, warning that if they go a bit further, dozens of invisible arrows will come flying at them. They might not even survive. I tip my hat to this protagonist. He's the god of acting. He should have won every Oscar. He says he'll go first to deactivate all the traps. Leaf isn't entirely convinced, thinking he's just making it up, but one of his team members checks the map and says the path narrows from this point and gets extremely dark ahead. This was a master move. If he'd done this in any other part of the cave, it probably wouldn't have worked. Even so, as Dan heads off to deactivate the traps, Leaf warns him that if he tries to run, he'll kill him himself. The protagonist, sly as he is, says he couldn't run because of his bad leg, even though his legs look just fine. If you compare with what was shown before, he shouldn't even be walking. He says this is his way of showing respect since they're different from the hunters who only try to kill him. Yeah, right, these guys are different. They rob first and kill later. Dan continues along the path and says if they don't trust him, they can follow, but he won't be able to ensure their safety. Classic move, leaving them to decide. Leaf, who doesn't trust him one bit, tells the team not to be scared by this story and to keep following him. But the guys aren't dumb. They're holding back, not wanting to take an arrow to the head. They're this cautious because at the cave entrance, there are traps too. They almost got crushed by iron pillars. Leaf asks if their men are mice, and from the looks of it, they're mice. The protagonist is loving this situation. You can see that sly smile as he walks away. He wonders if he's gone far enough. On his way here, he collected some arrows scattered across the map. You brought them along for no particular reason, but now they'll have to be useful. Yes, he's going to do exactly what you're thinking. He picks up the arrow and stabs himself with it. The guys waiting for him hear a scream from deeper in the cave, and I bet the only thing that wasn't an act was that scream. Everyone is shocked. If they didn't believe there were traps, now they do. Leaf asks what's happening, but Dante tells them not to approach because the arrows are still coming. But Leaf couldn't care less. He says he's going to move forward. Anyone who doesn't will die right there. The guys are terrified, but they got no choice. It's either go or die. As they go further into the cave, Leaf shouts for Dante, asking where he is, while one of his companions points out a trail of blood on the ground. Following the trail, they find Dan lying on the ground with an arrow wound in his leg. He gets up slowly, saying he passed out from the pain. Leaf, looking around to check for traps, asks what happened to them. But Dante says not to worry since he managed to deactivate them all. The guys are relieved, thinking they're lucky stars that they won't get hit by any arrows. Leaf asks why he helped them since it would have been better for him to keep quiet, but the protagonist keeps his act up, saying it's because they're different from the previous adventurers. They didn't kill him as soon as they saw him, so we would try to help them stay alive as much as possible. If they believe this lie, I'm going to lose it. You and I wouldn't believe him in this situation. Danny keeps saying he was hit by one of the arrows while removing it from his leg, and I think he's a bit dumb because everyone knows that if an arrow hits you, you shouldn't pull it out. You should break it off. After removing it, he tells them to keep moving, and surprisingly, Leaf and all his companions actually buy his story. Jen can confirm this by checking their status screens as the trust level has increased. They're trusting him a lot more now. But this level of trust isn't enough. The performance has just begun. Another notification pops up saying his charisma has increased. It seems like his stats increase when he meets certain requirements. Since I don't think the story will let the protagonist become OP, we'll have to change his name to the Demon King of Acting. Leaf thinks he can use him if he plays his cards right, but says that with a wound like that in his life, the only thing he'll do is slow everyone down. So he orders one of his companions to offer Dan a shoulder to walk with. The protagonist is surprised by this act of kindness and thanks him, but Leaf says it's just gratitude since he saved them first. He's doing well with his act, but their boss isn't so easy to fool, so I'll have to do more to get everyone wrapped around his finger. This was just the first scene of his play. A second act is about to start. They finally reach the entrance to the Demon Lord's castle, the door with the goat's head hanging over it, fitting for a demon's castle. Leaf is impressed, saying it's better than he expected. When he opens the door and turns to Don to show him the treasure, the guy is crying. This is a performance worthy of Hollywood. The guy can hear fake crying man. Everyone is in shock, not understanding why he's crying. The guy carrying him asks why he's crying, and he replies that somehow it reminded him of his former companions, or rather, his family. Even Leaf is taken aback, asking if demon lords have families. Dan continues his performance, saying that in the past, even someone like him had people he loved. The castle, now completely destroyed, was once a beautiful palace with various monsters walking around until the day they were attacked. The demon lord tried to escape, but archers were readying arrows to shoot him down. When everything seemed lost, one of his family members protected him. A large ogre asked if he was okay and told him to run, but Dante, in tears, told him that he should escape too, though the ogre took even more arrows. Knowing he was about to die, he told him to run as fast as he could. Dan ran one way and the ogre went the other, straight to his death. Everyone in the castle died protecting him and he was left alone. It's worth a standing ovation. The guy is not only a professional actor, but also the biggest liar ever seen. People believe him so much that they start feeling sorry for him. You almost pity them for how gullible they are. They thought a demon lord would be someone horrible, without any feelings, someone who wouldn't cry or feel joy. But here's this guy in front of them crying over his dead companions. The trust level with everyone starts to increase, and even Leaf says this is completely different from when he heard. A woman had told him the demon lord was the worst being in existence, but what he's seeing doesn't seem like the monster she described. He decides to let it go, figuring the most important thing is that he's useful. Dan looks at them and thanks them from the bottom of his heart for bringing him back to the castle. As he expected, they're different from those who attacked his family, and maybe thanks to them, the dead might forgive him. He continues by saying that the demon lord's castle's treasure and his life are theirs. He'll soon be offering even his other treasure to gain their trust. They continue walking through the castle until they finally reach the lord's room. For the weakest demon, his castle is quite extravagant. I thought he'd live in a shack. As promised, he'll give them the castle's treasure. Leaf is already excited to find out where it is, but Dan reminds him that it's hidden with magic and he's now going to break the spell. He asks everyone to step back a bit, and since their trust level is high, they do it without hesitation. The protagonist thinks that just a bit more and his plan will be successful. Now it's time for the final touches. Will he summon all the monsters to catch them off guard? Actually, from the beginning, there wasn't any treasure in the castle, which was kind of obvious. The only thing left from the old demon lord was the 100 pounds, but this should be enough to fool him. Since he's in the world of Dungeon Raid, 1 pound is about 15 silver coins, and because the game has a system where discarded items drop on the map, he's planning to drop 76 pounds, or about 1,140 silver coins. But before that, he can't skip the grand cinematic performance. He starts by saying, "Great Lord of Servants, I'm the 71st demon lord who rules this world. To these brave heroes, in the name of the demon lord Dante, I should give them my treasure." After finishing his performance, he stands still with his hand raised. Everyone is waiting for something to happen, and then a bunch of coins starts falling from the air. The guys think for dreaming, it's literally raining money. A fiery cheer their bowl. Everyone starts gathering the coins from the ground, while Leaf lets out the most insane laugh you've ever heard. I really hope he's laughing with bad intentions, because if his laugh is this ugly, this guy will never get a date. A message saying that Leaf's trust has increased to Ficky pops up. Now he finally trusts the protagonist. He tells everyone to gather the coins and split them equally. Unlike his earlier plan, he now wants to keep using the demon lord since it would be a waste to get rid of him. The thing is, he trusts him, but he's still a jerk. Danny asks if he can say something and agree. Leaf asks if he has more to give. But this time, the protagonist is serious. He says he has some concerning news, using a magic spell that allows him to detect if someone enters the dungeon. He just sensed that about 30 adventurers have entered it right now. This news kills the Vaya. There are only about 10 people at most, so against 30 adventurers, they're doomed. Everyone starts panicking. He just got the treasure, and now they might lose it all. Leaf asks if there's another exit from the castle, but Dante says the only way out is the way they came in. Judging by how scared they are in this world, adventurers aren't the friendliest. They say if they run into them, they could be massacred. The protagonist says that if they can't avoid the adventurers, they'll have to face them, leaving Leaf confused since there's no way they can win against a group that large. Danny asks if Leaf has the map, lying that his powers aren't strong enough to determine which route the adventurers will take. There are 3 routes leading to the castle, and if he's used as bait, the enemies will likely use some kind of magic to track him. This way, they'll take a different route, allowing his group to escape for the exit. For a moment, Leaf even thinks he's sacrificing himself, but he quickly changes his mind, asking if Dante is just planning to run away. The protagonist plays his role, saying he'd never deceive them, and suggests they have a proposal. He whispers something in Leaf's ear that makes him quite excited. Could it be the treasure later on? Leaf tells him not to share the plan with the others while instructing his allies to get organized. This was all part of the protagonist's plan. He assumed Leaf wouldn't believe him, so he devised this scheme. A bit later, you can see that they split into 2 groups, with 5 people going with the Demon Lord. One of them even remarks that their leader's move was incredibly brave. Going back a bit, Leaf tells them to collect all the coins as quickly as possible. He says they'll divide into 2 groups to reach the exit, which even his allies find puzzling, as this plan doesn't make sense. If they divide their forces, there's no way they'll defeat the 30 adventurers who entered. Little do they know, that's the plan. He tells everyone to shut up and keep listening. The dungeon map has 3 possible routes to find the exit, and the invaders are likely as cautious as they are sticking to just one route. With a group of 30 people, they're practically a mini army, so they would obviously be no match. So with that creepy grin, he says they should bet on their chance of survival. Everyone's a bit scared by his words, but he continues, saying there's a 100% chance that at least one of them will survive. He says his group will take all the money, and naturally, the others think he's trying to keep all the cash for himself. They're not wrong, he totally is. But the second group will take the Demon Lord. If they can get out alive, they can turn him over to the authorities and collect the reward. Compared to Leaf's group, the other side has it much worse. This is the reward for capturing a Demon Lord. They might even get prestigious heroes. Leaf's team is hesitant about the idea, so their leader shouts, asking if they're men or mice. He already knows the answer. He then asks if they really want to die like dogs and leave their families behind. The leader keeps questioning if they're really that cowardly and says he wants everyone to survive if possible. I take back what I said. The best actor isn't the protagonist, it's Leaf. The guy convinced everyone to go along with his plan. Back in the cave, Leaf seems pretty pleased and has managed to fool them. As he's still thinking Don was planning to flee, the protagonist convinces him to send one of his men with him. This way, he can keep an eye on him to make sure he doesn't escape. He should come up with a reason to keep all the gold himself, giving him the upper hand. If what he said is true, and some of his men are sacrificed along with Dante, it means all the gold stays with him. And if he's lying, he can't escape anyway, so everyone wins. The psychopath Leaf, who's only out for himself, agrees to the plan as long as he benefits. For the protagonist, it's like Leaf handed him victory on a silver platter. Their forces were split into 2 groups, or rather, cut in half. So he begins his plan to kill each of the adventurers there. They all start feeling a huge tremor in the cave, thinking it might be the invaders. Further ahead, the ground starts glowing. A magic circle appears, creating a wind so strong it blows out the adventurers' torches. One of them, who trusts the Demon Lord a lot, asks what's happening, but trusting that swindler was his biggest mistake. The protagonist covers his mouth and tells him not to make a sound if he doesn't want more pain. He slowly draws his sword, saying he's in their debt, and kills the first one on his own. The others, who are still looking at the magic circle, don't notice that their colleague just got killed. Even if they did, they have other things to worry about. From the magic circle, a golem emerges, a massive creature that leaves everyone scared. It hits the ceiling, causing a small collapse, and the fallen rocks crush a few of them. Those who survive are grabbed by the golem. One guy tries to help his friend, but the stones are so tough, they break his sword. With just one punch, the golem takes both of them out. Only the guy with the ponytail is left. Good thing he's not wearing white pants because he'd have soiled them by now. The Demon Lord appears behind him, and you almost pity his innocence as he tells the Demon Lord to run. Obviously, he's impaled straight through the heart, and before dying, he asks why he did that. The moral of the story, guys, cursed is the man who trusts another man, and in this case, who trusts a demon. And to answer your question, why did he do it? It's pretty clear. He's a Demon Lord. Here's my theory. Maybe the protagonist is so into his role that he's actually becoming the Demon Lord. Maybe that's why he can kill without remorse. Meanwhile, Leaf's group also heard the earthquake, and he thinks the battle against the intruders must have started, believing a bit more in what the protagonist said. But the guy's a total psychopath. The only thing he feels is happiness, that some of his group members died. However, his happiness vanishes when he sees the Demon Lord standing in front of him. He now is surprised by this sudden appearance. Leaf is in shock, wondering why he's there, but the Lord just stands there, cold and calculating, staring at them. Leaf realizes there weren't any intruders, but he asks what the other members of his group are. It seems he's still trying to believe in the Demon Lord. However, drawing his blood-stained sword, Danny says he killed all of his companions. His acting is so convincing that it feels like he did it all by himself. Leaf starts getting mad, thinking this must be some kind of joke, though the only joke being played was dance manipulation and deceit. To make him even angrier, the Demon Lord says they were just idiots, and it was extremely funny seeing the looks of despair on their faces. Even the psychopath Leaf gets mad at that. Everyone realizes he was fooling them from the beginning, and Dante doesn't stop adding fuel to the fire, saying he could only trick them because they're as dumb as monkeys. I thought he was a bit harsh on monkeys there. Did they really think a Demon Lord would side with humans? Leaf is consumed by rage, and everyone lunges at the protagonist with bloodlust. But again, this is all part of the plan. A stone golem that was hiding in the shadows appears at the last second, smashing them, taking down 2 with 1 strike. The golem keeps pounding on everyone. The thing is so strong that all its attacks are lethal, but one of them is just as strong. The rock uses his meat tenderizer hammer and crushes the golem with 1 blow. At that moment, he looks at Leaf, saying he did it. So that was his biggest mistake, as the demon lord comes from behind and finishes him off. Dan even thanks them, while the golem reassembles behind him. Leaf is completely confused, but the protagonist explains that it's quite simple to kill a golem. You just have to destroy the core in his chest. Even weak adventurers like them could do it, but they were so blinded by the protagonist's taunts that they didn't even think of that. Now the power dynamic has completely changed. The demon lord is calling the shots. Lee says he's entirely different from before, and the one in front of him now is the true demon lord. But even with this unfavorable situation, he's still planning to survive. As a veteran adventurer, he's been in tight spots before and knows how to get out of them. Like I said, the roles have completely reversed, and now Leaf is the one doing the shoddy acting. He even calls the demon lord Sir. He drops his sword to the ground, saying he surrenders, and like he's given up on life, he asks Dan to kill him quickly and without pain. The protagonist slowly approaches with his sword in hand. It seems his plan is working, and once it gets close enough, Leaf will use the hidden dagger on his back to finish him. He can do it since his stats are much higher than the protagonist's. As Dan gets closer, he glances at the monster price list again. His money is enough to buy a slime. Meanwhile, Leaf gets more excited with each step he takes, but the protagonist suddenly stops a bit further away than Leaf planned. Leaf is puzzled, wondering why he stopped, but gets his answer right away. Using his ability, Dan can see through him. He can literally read everything he's thinking. He knew from the start what Leaf's plan was. I have to admit, this protagonist knows how to crush someone's self-esteem. He really became the demon lord character. He says that it's really over this time, checkmate. Leaf is furious, wondering how someone he thought was so weak could dare mess with him. As he lunges at the protagonist, he says he's the only victor here. His attack aims straight for Don's neck, but before he can land the blow, he falls flat. Looking down, he sees a tiny slime stuck to his foot, pinning him to the ground. The guy was so mad he didn't even notice the slime. Seeing that Dan's gotten closer, he tries to attack again. But his plans are foiled once more as the golem grabs and crushes his arm. I should begin to feel sorry for this guy. To make matters worse, the protagonist keeps humiliating him, asking how it feels to be crushed by someone he thought was weaker, and what it's like to be killed this way. He pulls out his bloodied sword, while Leaf wonders where he went wrong. Was it when he didn't kill Dante immediately, or when he got the map from that woman? But truth is, his mistake was challenging the demon lord from the start. He realizes he should never have gone against him. Even if he's weak, he's still a demon lord. Guys, I take back everything bad I said about this story. This scene was amazing. I can't wait to see this protagonist become a demon lord to be respected. Right after that, he seems to be in a white mist. In it, he sees his father's face telling him to get ready. He obviously can't stand seeing this man's face anymore and says that as if being in hell wasn't enough. Now he has to keep looking at his ugly mug. His father keeps talking, saying that his life will be much worse without him. Angie tells him to shut up while shaking the mist to make his father disappear. Then he hears someone calling his name. He was asleep, and when he opens his eyes, he finds himself staring at a beautiful woman with pink hair. Life's good when you're a demon lord. Wish I could wake up to that. But he's completely confused by what's happening, which makes sense since a random woman just showed up in his home. But I take back what I said. I wouldn't want this woman waking me up either, because as soon as he wakes up, she's showing him a contract for a debt of 100 gold coins he borrowed 2 months ago. The worst part is that with interest, it's already up to 196 pounds. That's the biggest scam I've ever seen, minus 100 coins turning into nearly 200 in 2 months. The protagonist doesn't get it and wonders who this woman even is. This all started 3 weeks ago when he entered Dang's body. After he managed to kill a group of adventurers, he was so tired he collapsed on the ground. He receives a notification that the tutorial is complete and that the demon lord's level has increased. Aside that, his politics, leadership, and charisma stats have also improved. As a reward, he can choose an S-rank skill. But since the tutorial is over, he can no longer access the previous skills. The worst part is that he can only choose one, and it's still level 1. The game is just beginning. From the way things are going, he won't be able to return to his world and will really have to let his Dante a demon lord. Since he has to pick a skill, the most useful one is Apostle of Aphrodite, because for someone who uses politics and deceit, knowing what others are thinking is the best thing. After all that, the protagonist finally gives in to exhaustion, looking at the damage he caused, then lays on the golem's hand and falls asleep right there. Men need rest too, right? When he woke up the next day, he was lying in bed. Looking around, he saw a completely trashed room. It's probably Don's room. When he passed out in the golem's hands, it must have taken him there. The protagonist hoped all of this was a dream and that he returned to his body when he woke up, but he's still Dante. And that's to change the ending of this world as the weakest demon lord. And a new problem now plagues him, or rather, a disaster. A girl with a look as cold as the Arctic demanding payment for a debt he didn't even incur. Her name is Lapis Lazuli, but let's call her Blue to make it easier. It's tough for the demon lord trying to convince her that he wasn't the one who borrowed the money, but the girl says that 2 months ago, it was exactly him who asked for the loan at the commerce chamber, and the proof is the contract signed by him. The protagonist realizes that his story isn't going to work. They've been arguing about this all week. The guy hasn't had a second of peace. First it was bandits, now it's a loan shark. The life of a demon lord isn't easy. The worst part is the contract's interest rate is 3% per month. How did the previous demon lord sign this garbage? Actually, he thinks the real idiots are the lenders who gave money to Dante, who's basically the friend you know won't pay you back. Before anything else, he asks if he can ask her some questions. Even though she's cold, she readily agrees to answer. His first question is what happens if he doesn't pay, and well, as you expect, when you don't pay the loan shark, you become a fond memory, if you know what I mean. But these loan sharks are pretty nice. They will kill him. They'll just take all of Dan's properties. Basically, that rundown castle is all he has left. He'll make him do some skrisses. I hope it doesn't involve giving up his other treasure. His last question is what day it is. Blue doesn't get what he's asking at first, but when the Lord releases his demonic aura, you and this girl who seems so cold gets scared. He asks again what the day, month, and year are. And she kneels, apologizing for her rudeness, and says today is April 17, 1505. He's 6 days past the due date. If the interest keeps piling up, he's going to go bankrupt for sure. But the protagonist couldn't care less. He proposes a deal to her. This time he wants to borrow 10,000 pounds. This guy has my respect. If you're going to declare bankruptcy, you might as well take all the money from the bank, crash the stock market, and cause a global crisis. Now it's April 20 and we're at the Kuska HQ. A goblin worker is running with some papers in his hand saying he's late for something. His name is Torkel, the greedy goblin. He's signing some documents that need to be delivered to Prince Payment before 8 p.m. All I know is that this guy's doing 38 things at once while running. Life for the working class is tough. At the table, we see several locked characters, and the host says that for merchants, time is money. The goblin has already made them lose quite a bit of it. The old man with some symbols on his forehead says the meeting will begin. The Concusta company is where the 5th and 9th in the Demon Lord ranks reside as guardians. This is the best company in the demon world, and the one in charge of running it is Ivar Lodbrok, one of the 3 ancient vampires. In short, this company is full of high-ranking employees in the demon world, and the one who leads it all is the son of Ragnar. He asks Blue to explain the reason for today's meeting. The monsters sitting around are outraged that a hybrid of humans and succubi will speak. Apparently, other demons consider hybrids an inferior race, like a curse in their bloodline. Then the guy with no backbone tells everyone to shut up, and they instantly clam up, not making a sound. Blue continues explaining the topic of the meeting. The 71st demon lord, Dante, took another loan. The people there think she's joking by calling a meeting for something so trivial. But Ivar tells her to continue. The amount of money he asked for was 10,000 pounds. And if you thought 10,000 pounds wasn't much, that's the kind of money a small country has. The goblin thinks it's absurd and asks if he really asked for all that, and even she couldn't believe it when she first heard. But the protagonist confirms he really does want to borrow 10,000 pounds. She asks why he's asking for it since he's already in debt. It makes sense. Who's crazy enough to lend more money to someone who's already in debt? But he continues, saying he wants to borrow more money to pay off a first loan. Now even she doesn't get it. He wants to borrow money to pay off a loan, but that would put him further in debt, so he'd need to take out another loan to pay off the next one. I don't know. The protagonist asks why she lent him the money in the first place, given that he's known to be unreliable. She tries to change the subject, saying that's not true, but he keeps going, saying it's fine. He knows she thought he'd be unable to repay the debt, which is why she gave him the loan. Her real goal was to bankrupt him and turn him into a corporate slave. The protagonist is always one step ahead. He figured it all out. Blue continues with a straight face, saying that's not the case, so he asks another question. If she went there on company orders to get close to the demon lord, but she insists she did it on her own. The protagonist gives a little chuckle. It seems he likes other liars too. Back to the main point, he says that if she lends him all that money, it means he'll be a lackey for the company for the rest of his life. 10,000 pounds for his soul isn't a bad deal. For her, it would also be great, since if she could turn a demon lord into a corporate lapdog, she'd definitely get promoted. The protagonist even grabs her chin and asks, while looking in her eyes, if she agrees with this. This guy knows his moves to win over a waifu, but it seems like he's not that smooth because she quickly pulls his hand away from her face but agrees with the plan. The goblin is wondering if there's some trick behind this. Asking for 10,000 pounds and we can't even pay 100 seems insane. Ivar also finds it strange and asks her to continue. The protagonist knew this might happen, so he tells her he's gone mad. The best strategy is to act crazy. Everyone will understand any nonsense you do. He starts saying that a plague would turn the world upside down, and he would be the one to create the cure, all for the sake of a loved one. Everyone there is confused, wondering who Downey's loved one could be, but she continues saying the loved one is her, the demon lord's lover. The demons start calling her a slut. I can't believe she managed to seduce a demon lord. She continues, saying she got close to him and became his lover. Others call her low-ranked trash and wonder how she dared to become a demon lord's lover. Apparently, even if the protagonist is a low-ranked demon lord, he's still respected. But she says she did it to turn him into a company lackey. But she says that Ivar bursts into loud laughter. He's quite pleased with her. A succubus hybrid managed to seduce a demon lord and turn him into the company's lapdog. And to do it, she can give up her virginity to him. If that's not a work of art, I don't know what is. It's simply cinematic. The guys think she's manipulating the demon lord when in reality, he's the one manipulating them. The vampire starts laughing uncontrollably. Normally, he would never lend money to someone as incompetent as Dant, but this time he's making a special exception. He tells Blue to return to Dant's castle and inform him that he'll be given the 10,000 pounds he deserves. With this, the first part of his plan, which was to get the 10,000 pounds, was successful. A few days later, on May 3, Blue is talking to some merchants, instructing them to gather all the herbs on the continent. The guy is a bit shocked that she's spending 8,000 pounds to hire people to do this, and even questions what she's going to do with all these herbs since they're just ordinary herbs. She tells him not to worry about the reason since these are direct orders from the demon lord and tells them to start as soon as possible. As she's walking through the city, her beauty attracts the attention of many men. Rumors that she's the demon lord's lover have spread, and people are also saying that he must be insane to have spent that much money. Quite a bit later, on July 20, Blue arrives to talk to Dante. As he had asked, she successfully obtained all the herbs from the continent, and warehouses have been built to keep them safe. Honestly, even she doesn't know why she's following his orders. She asks what the heck he's doing. What he's done so far is saying that an epidemic is about to hit, and he spent 80% of the money on a useless herb. In short, even she thinks the guy has lost his mind. But Dante continues to play it cool and tells her to figure it out on her own. But first, he'd like to congratulate her on her hard work and offers a toast. She thinks about refusing, but accepts the drink after he guilt-trips her by saying he did all this just for her. The guy is like a psycho. This drink must be spiked for sure. Anyway, she takes the drink and they toast her future. She drinks it, and I don't know if that was the best or worst choice of her life. She asks what kind of garbage he made her drink, but he's laughing like a psychopath. He says it's a drink made from the herbs he bought and asks if it tastes good. I'm starting to think this protagonist only gets pleasure from pulling others down. She asks if he's messing with her or something, but he says it all makes sense, in his head, at least. He asks the day again and says it's time. He writes something down and tells her that from today on she shouldn't come to the castle, but to another location and watch him for a while. She asks what the heck this means, but he continues to be mysterious and says she'll understand when she sees it. Since she has a lot at stake, he tells her to relax and explore a few places. 4 days later, at the Traveler's Hot Springs in Syracuse, Blue is getting ready to take a bath. She says she can't understand the Demon Lord's mind and doesn't think she'll find anything in a place like this. She might not, but I already found a few things here. She pulls out the paper he gave her, listing a series of symptoms like joint pain, fever, and black bruises. She thinks it's impossible to have predicted the symptoms of a disease, but she still feels uneasy. She heard the scream. When she looks, a child is fainted on the ground. The girl passed out of nowhere and says her whole body hurts. When Blue checks, the girl is burning up and orders her to be taken to the clinic immediately. She's shocked when she sees a black mark appear on the girl's neck. All the symptoms he described are showing up in this girl. More people passing out around her, and she realizes that everything he said so far is true. That's what you get for not trusting the protagonist. If she hadn't drunk the tea, she'd be dead now too. At the clinic, some patients have already died. Just within an hour, 30 patients have shown up. Blue is in shock, sitting on a bench, still not believing he managed to predict this disease. The doctor in charge asks if she's feeling all right since everyone at the bathhouse has died except her. He suggests she leave the city quickly to avoid getting infected. She remembers the tea she drank, and even though she finds impossible, she can't see any other explanation but to admit that he was right. A few more days have passed, and now it's July 16, and Tinkerbell is carrying a scroll through the castle's corridors. In this story, nobody stays idle, even Tinkerbell is put to work. She enters the meeting room where the goblin is. He's in a meeting with the Queen, and is obviously upset that Tinkerbell interrupted, but the Queen seems quite understanding and says if she interrupted the meeting, it must be for something urgent. The Queen is none other than the ninth-rank Demon Lord, the Demon of Beauty Payment. And I thought this goblin was two-faced. When he talks to the Queen, he's calm and submissive, but when it's poor Tinkerbell, he almost kills her with his shouting. But I guess that's fair. You have to be submissive to a queen like that. Anyway, Tinkerbell says she received an urgent message from HQ. The goblin starts reading it, but is horrified by its contents. It mentions an epidemic that broke out, starting in bathhouses and quickly spreading throughout the kingdom. Its spread is inevitable, and it's expected to reach neighboring countries within days with an 80% mortality rate. The Queen sees the goblin's expression and asks what's wrong, but he keeps reading the letter's contents. Besides that, there's information that the Demon Lord Dante created a miraculous remedy that can cure the disease. It seems that one of his 4 subordinates, Blue, monopolized on orders all the herbs from the continent needed for the production of the medicine. I didn't even know Dante had 4 subordinates. I thought he had none. The Queen asks to read the letter's contents, but her reaction is quite different from what you'd expect. She doesn't seem mad at Dante or anything. She just finds the situation interesting. Back at his castle, Dante is looking at the sky. Now, answer me how he's looking at the sky when his castle is in a cave. He notices a storm approaching, and Blue is also approaching. Dan comments that she returned faster than he expected and asks if she managed to relax a bit and spread her wings. The worst part is the protagonist acting clueless, asking why she's so pale. This guy took her to the edge of the slaughterhouse and then asks if she didn't enjoy it. She questions if he knew about this from the beginning. Of course he did. He bought the herbs that cure the disease and described the symptoms. It must have been a wild guess, right? The guy's turned into a full-blown villain. When he speaks, a lightning bolt strikes, illuminating the windows and casting a shadow in front of him. Look at the shadow's face and tell me this guy isn't the purest evil you've ever seen. Even Blue is taken back. Even the half-demon is scared of the protagonist. He really knew this was going to happen from the start, and the reason is that in the game Dungeon Raid, the story begins in 1515, 10 years in the future, a time when the plague has already spread and turned the world into a dark place. According to the game's information, the plague started in a hot springs town, and it took a year before the cure was created. The protagonist was thrown into the game right at the year of the epidemic. Because of Blue's contract, he could find out the timeline, as add the date. He asks her what the company thinks about all this. It must be a hornet's nest there. Even now, they've called an emergency meeting with the executives. The protagonist gets closer and asks why she's not at the company too. I can't believe this protagonist threw Blue under the bus. The girl just wanted promotion to earn more. With a psychopath's look on his face, he tries to guess what she's thinking. Though guessing might be a strong word, given he has the mind-reading ability. He continues, saying that going back to the company now could be a risk to her life. Since it's impossible to predict a plague, the higher-ups might think this was intentional. But who would do that, and why? The only answer would be Blue, who seduced the Demon Lord as his lover, then pretended to turn him into a company pet, and then, coincidentally, was at the spot where the plague started. In short, he's managed to make her the prime suspect, which is why she went to him instead of the company. Since childhood, she's always been treated like a half-breed with bad blood. She had to work hard to get where she is, and everything she's built up will collapse because of one man. She doesn't even really know this man. He's totally different from the Dante she knew before. Unlike the other one, this Dante really acts like a true Demon Lord. Dante says there's only one path left for her, to kneel and become his servant, and he'll promise her power. But this power isn't physical, obviously because he's a weakling. They'll put her in charge of all transactions related to the cure. Because of the plague, many people, if not most, will die, whether they're children, young people, powerful individuals, overweight folks, black or Asian people. There's no discrimination. Everyone's going to die. She has the power to control the distribution of the cure. She controls who lives and who dies. The people who belittle her for being mixed race will bow down to her, begging for the cure. This is the power he offers, control of the population through fear. Bloom doesn't know whether to accept his proposal, but it's not like she has much choice. She no longer has the company to return to, and his motivational speech actually touched her heart. So she kneels and says that her life now belongs to His Demon Highness Dante. To seal the loyalty contract, she gives his hand a little kiss. And since she's giving him everything, he'll ensure she has the best view of the chaos to come. A few days later, Bloom is indeed working as a servant, having to bring down the warm breakfast. Since she handed her life over to the Demon Lord, a week has passed and she's working as a maid. She knocks on his door but gets no response, so she decides to enter anyway. Currently, the only things the Demon Lord does are read all the books in the castle and sleep. Bloom has no idea what's going on in Don's head, but now that she's his servant, she has to follow his orders. And the Demon Lord is actually kind of cute. He's not making those terrifying faces. About half a year ago, she had a meeting with Dante. She calmly tried to introduce herself, but he interrupted her mid-sentence. The Demon Lord at that time didn't care about knowing her name. He was stingy, and all he cared about was money. After she loaned him that money, she tried to make his life a bit more difficult by spreading rumors that there was a treasure in the demon castle. And guess who the bandits who came to see her were? Of course, it was Leaf. However, this Demon Lord in front of her surpassed all her imagination. He had the lives of millions of people in his hands. It's as if he's transformed into a completely different person. Looking at him, she wonders how he can sleep so peacefully. The answer is simple. He doesn't care if everyone else suffers. They already received letters from several countries about the medicine, but her old company is still pretty quiet, which is quite strange. Meanwhile, at the company, the fat goblin is talking to Ivar, asking for permission to enter his room. The guy really lives up to his name of being a vampire. When the goblin enters the room, he's sitting there, illuminated by just 3 candles. Looking at his face a bit more closely, he seems a bit more worn out than before. He asks what the current situation is, and the goblin says it couldn't be worse, as the virus keeps spreading rapidly. According to the company's analysis, about 30% of the population is going to die. The goblin is in shock, asking if he's joking, but the guy gives him a threatening look and asks if he's ever joked before. Starting today, all the lords will stop doing business with them. The goblin gets angry and slams the table. All of this was caused by that mutt Blue. The company hasn't been able to contact her, so it's safe to assume all of this was premeditated. According to the report, she was at the location when the plague began, and she monopolized all the herbs needed for the cure. It's impossible to predict a plague. Even the gods couldn't do that. So the assumption is that this plague was created intentionally. Now they have an interesting theory. We know that the protagonist didn't create this plague as he only knew the information. Or could there be a twist in the original game? Someone actually created the plague? If so, that would be really cool. Now they have to think about who might have caused the plague. Blue certainly doesn't have the power or intelligence to do something like that. Demon Lord Dante is also just an idiot, so they're probably being used by someone more powerful. The goblin asks when the world would be capable of creating such a plague, and Ivar has one person in mind, someone who would definitely be able to create a disease if he wanted to, the best necromancer on the continent known as the Immortal Monarch. He's the person who knows the most about diseases and black magic, the 8th-ranked Demon Lord Barbatos. The goblin thinks Barbatos would really be capable of something like this, not just because of his knowledge, but because he also hates humans. In the past, he's waged many wars against them, and the way this plague is spreading, humans could even go extinct. Ivar says that's the nature of demons. The goblin questions whether it was really Barbatos who did this, and if it was, what would be the plan to go against him? The company has good relations with all the demon lords, which is why it has grown so large and prosperous. If he goes against the demon lord without evidence, the others could turn against the company. But he says he already has enough evidence, Blue and Dante. I'm already predicting that this old vampire is going to mess up big time. Adolf appears from his shadows bringing news. You and the goblin didn't sense her presence. When Ivar picks up the scroll, the guy starts laughing uncontrollably. He orders the goblin to contact Queen Payman, as she's the only person who'd stand against Barbatos. Queen Payman and Barbatos are on bad terms, so she's sure to not hold back against him. The old man starts to lose it, saying they'll never try anything against him again. The guy disappears from the chair he was sitting in, and when the goblin looks behind him, he's biting the elf. He literally started showing his fangs, saying he's going to make Blue part of his collection. Meanwhile, poor Blue is trying to wake up the protagonist. She's calling him repeatedly until he finally wakes up. I would have just slapped him. When he finally does, Blue says there's a summons, and the protagonist asks what it's about. Apparently, it's for a meeting called Walpurgis Night, a day when all the demon lords are summoned to one place. Meanwhile, what looks like a witch is singing about Damp and his romance with a half-succubus. While Blue is telling him to walk a bit faster, Dante decided to dress up nicely this time, picking the best outfit for his wardrobe. But as someone who hates leaving the house, he's wondering why he has to go. She finds it strange that the demon lord doesn't know about the Night of the Demon Lords and asks if he's ever been, but obviously he says he hasn't. He just took over Dan's body, and I'm gonna think he knows if he's been or not. This night is when all the demon lords gather to discuss matters that go beyond their nations. It's all to maintain order in the world. The protagonist is less interested in going, but she insists, saying the topic this time is the spreading plague. That's reason enough for the protagonist to be required to attend, given that he has the monopoly on the cure. If he doesn't attend, they could use it as an excuse to use force against him. That would be bad for them. If everything stays at a discussion, he can resolve it, but if things escalate, he can use Blue. That's why he spent so much money in the first place. He asked her how they're going to get there, as traveling by land could be risky, but Blue, being the best employee in history, has that covered. She lifts up her watch and tells him to wait just a moment, and then singing is heard in the distance. The witch from earlier arrives. As the protagonist sees her, he's in shock. He might be surprised because the witch looks like she's 12 years old. But it's not just one witch, there are 5. They're the Berber sisters. The protagonist is still in shock looking at them and even asks Blue if it won't be a problem since they're just children. The first Japanese protagonist with a sense of awareness. She gives him a deadpan look and explains that you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. These witches have contracts with demons that keep them eternally young. In short, they already started with a trope that they may look like kids but are over 500 years old. He asks them to lift their heads and thanks them for accepting his request. Apparently, our protagonist knows how to charm a lady, they're already falling for him. But Blue seems to take an issue with that. Are we going to see a love triangle in this story? All I know is that he climbs into the carriage and the witches start talking like pilots. When they arrive in Niflheim, the city seems lively. The protagonist comments that the journey must have been tiring for them and invites them for dinner as a thank you. Blue seems to be a bit jealous, but he thinks she's just worried about the company trying something. He says no one would be crazy enough to try anything against a demon lord. At the bar, everyone seems to be having fun, monsters and humans. This is a city where all races can have fun, but then they hear a fight nearby. When they look, I see a man kicking a dwarf and complaining about his service. The funniest part is that the one doing it is the 72nd ranked Demon Lord Andromelius. If you remember from the game's tutorial, a monster he faced was the 71st Demon Lord Dante. This means the 72nd is such a useless demon that he wasn't even mentioned. Things just got a bit more interesting for the protagonist. The protagonist then raises his wine glass and arouses interest in the eyes of those around. And by throwing his glass to the ground, he said that this journey was going to be more fun than he expected. Upon hearing the sound of the glass breaking, Andromelius turns to look at what is happening. But he comes across a sinister look from our protagonist who stares deep into his soul. A tension arises in the environment between the group of Dantalion and the current Demon Lord. For them, Andromelius questions why they are looking at him. But upon noticing the laughter, Dantalion, the Demon Lord, people were submitted. Heading towards our hero, he questions the reason for the laughter, insulting him as a son and a mother. Without wasting time, Dantalion calls for Lala, who is ready to listen to his commands. He asks if Andromelius has any force protecting him. And Lala replied that no, because as far as she knew, no one but your majesty had the size he spent most of his time in casinos. She completes that Andromelius is infamous for using his position to torment the people, and even among the demon wards, he is considered an absolute disgrace. Our protagonist understands and turns to face the current lord once more nervous. Andromelius wondered what was wrong with in his clothes, but he noticed something in his horns, beginning to consider that the woman behind him would be a succubus half-breed, so it would be him they were talking about. Before anything, Law asks that Her Majesty do nothing rash, as conflicts between demon lords always bring many complications. With a mocking smile, our protagonist questions about the common law, and Law affirmed that it was indeed because a demon lord is above even the nobles, so they are the highest ranking of beings with the destructive power of a world. But still, there are 72 of them in the world, and due to a variety of problems that arise, they use common laws instead of codified laws to ensure order. As our hero probably already knew, the common laws prohibit demon wards from looking at each other. And if Dantalian's emotions start a childish fight, he will certainly be punished. After thinking a little, the protagonist says he understands and then goes towards Andromelius, confronting him head-on. With a diabolical face, the enemy demon lord questions who the hell is the man in front of him. But returning the favor, Dantalian affirms that his identity does not matter, because seeing him act like this in front of the weak makes him sick, and besides, he tells the demon to get out of his way, calling him trash. Andromelius, in turn, threatened the protagonist, asking if he is willing to meet his end there. But without being intimidated, Dantalian says he wants to see the man try to do that. After such provocation, that demon lord loses control and prepares for an offensive. Miss Lala decides to intervene, but stops when she sees that her master told her not to interfere. Thinking that this was great, our hero was almost getting the one it, and now all that was left was to take a punch from that man. But with his fist just inches through his face, Andromelius stops the blow. By a hair, Andromelius recognizes his fellow demon lord in front of him, and this surprises the protagonist, who realizes he's not dealing with the complete fool. While laughing and grinning from them, Dantalian's shoulder of the blue-haired demon commented that he almost broke the law. Continuing his laughter, he remembers that demon lords are forbidden to attack each other. Thinking of Dantalian as a dam of blue-haired demon lords, and that if he hadn't realized that the hero was one of them, he might have fallen for it. But with such a deliberate provocation, it was clear that Dantalian was trying to be hit by him. After laughing a little more, Andromelius takes a moment to mock his colleague, commenting it's a pity. Apparently, this whole situation leaves our hero somewhat frustrated. The blue-bearded demon in turn comments that he must leave now, but notices the presence of Walla at the scene, recognizing her as the one who seduced the demon lord and judging her as a dirty street rat. In his view, at least, she has eyes considered pretty, but she also has all the dirty and rotten smell like a lower class normally has. Finally, Andromelius questioned how she had managed to make that man fall in love with her. And touching her body, he says he is so curious he would like to try it and wants too. Breaking this invasive mood, Lal asks Andromelius to stop what he is doing, and receiving an order from someone like her clearly leaves the demon lord irritated. Then the blue-haired demon changes the subject, drawing Dantalian's attention to the common walls mentioned earlier. With a sadistic expression, he affirms and replies only among the demon lords. Andromelius raises his fists, spares the girl, and punches her face with tremendous force. What he was trying to say, in other words, is that one could attack anyone who was not a demon lord. Saying that Lala is still fine, Andromelius states that he will beat her up in addition to using her in various ways, and after that he will return her to our protagonist. He provokes Dantalian while laughing, saying that even though she's a dirty rat, he will take good care of her. In the face of all these events, our hero, with a serious countenance, just adjusts his coat. After telling his Machiavellian plan, the blue-haired demon lord begins to laugh in the middle of the square. And with Lala on the ground in a terrible state, he continues to question if everyone is seeing him and affirming that he will show no mercy to anyone who dares oppose. Then Andromalius orders everyone to kneel before his presence and start worshipping him. In case they do not obey, he threatens the citizens using Lala as an example of disobedience, and besides, he will force them if necessary. The citizens begin to understand the situation in question because while some show surprise, others are in compliance. Again, that demon lord can't stop laughing while looking at the girl's situation, deciding on to step on her, causing her to feel intense pain. He delights in all this, saying a few on his break, while our hero remains cool and distant. Trying to provoke the protagonist once more, Andromalius questions how he is feeling, since his colleague is being demoned by him right in front of him and he can do nothing about it. Asking for everyone's attention, Andromalius, in a state of extreme excitement, commands him to say his mate because he is the one at the top of the world. He is the demon lord Andromalius. In contrast to his happiness, now an expression of anger takes over the demon lord, because he notices that Dantalion is laughing and questions him about what is so funny. Dantalion says it was nothing much, but Andromalius has been speaking so arrogantly until now. Yet still, the hero wonders how many people there will really follow him. In a frenzy, the blue-haired demon lord questions if the protagonist is some kind of sore loser, because it is customary that if they do not follow him, he will dominate them by force, just like that dirty half-breed. In an ironic provocation, Dantalion asked if there was anyone in this world who had been dominated by him by force. This deeply irritated Andromalius, but something surprised him even more at this moment. Behind him, the woman slowly rises, standing in front of him and wiping her face with her hand. Andromalius calls for a curse and warns that he should have kept his mouth shut because now he is angrier than ever. Lala, however, does not stop staring at the lord who in her mind generated disrespect for his authority. Did gets the girl again in her face for daring to challenge him. But before his eyes, the unexpected happens with Lala not yielding to his attacks and standing resilient while staring at him once again. As he raises his fists in another attempt, Andromalius tells the girl not to be so arrogant because an insect like her should kneel before his presence. In the face of all this, Dantalion for now just watches his companion get beaten by that man, because he thinks that Lala was someone who lived trash as a half-breed since she was a child, so she was already used to being beaten this way. In this case, the enraged fists of Andromalius no longer hurt her enough. Andromalius enters into an ever-increasing fury as he beats the girl, affirming himself to be a king of this world. After apologizing to his citizen for borrowing his dagger, Dantalion finally decides to intervene in the fight. On another level, Lala still stands, making Andromalius begin to question what is wrong with that woman because she does not even move. Moreover, he does not understand the problem of this girl to be looking at him so deeply this way. In his mind, Andromalius can think of nothing but chilling because his fury is already at an enormous level. However, while contemplating ending the girl's life, Dantalion passes his dagger across the eyes of the blue-haired demon lord, creating a perfect horizontal cut that spans the entirety of his two eyes. Amid blood and pain, everyone is surprised by the protagonist's audacity. Dantalion is visibly satisfied with this, and Andromalius falls to the ground kneeling while lamenting his eyes. With an air sadism, our protagonist says that he no longer needs his eyes since he cannot clearly see the strength of the person he's in a fight with. Lala intervenes, questioning her majesty about what he did and if he does not realize the significance of it. But he just approaches her, grabbing her by the waist, hugging her and thanking her for everything. Lala feels loved by the gesture of affection she received, and Dantalion, with a wicked look again, thanks her, saying it is from the bottom of his heart. Then he asks his assistant to extend her left hand, stating that he wanted to give it to her on a better occasion, that he will give it now while it is shining more beautifully than ever. Lala receives a sparkling ring and asks her majesty what it is. But Dantalion holds her hand, telling her not to say anything for now and just watch, raising the girl's hand while presenting himself to the people with no fine as the demon lord of rank 71 Dantalion, and unexpectedly introduces the person by his side as the love of his life. Dantalion continues saying that they may have different statuses, but in the end, none of that matters, and even if it is forbidden, they will be together because it is true love. Publicly, our hero announced he has nothing against Andromalius, like he hurt the person he loves. Then in a popular appeal, the protagonist questioned everyone if such injustice can be forgiven, and in response to his feelings, he affirms that it definitely cannot, even if he is a demon lord. In the middle of the city square, the protagonist's declaration is heard by all who cannot believe that this is happening. A demon lord is really breaking the laws of the lords just to save the love of his life. In the face of that commotion, Dantalion asks his dear Lala to take a step and look back, because it is now that things will get interesting. In his speech to the people, the protagonist claims that they all submit to a questionable demon lord. When asking if they are really okay with this, some of the citizens begin to buy into the speech and revolt. Then Dantalion tells everyone that if justice really exists in that world, then this man deserves to face a heavy judgment for all his actions so far. While agonizing the pain from the cut in his eyes, Andromalius tells the hero to shut up. He mocks the judgment because they have only one ranking difference and says that our hero is just a small shell getting carried away by the moment. Despite everything, Dantalion had violated the law by attacking him. While laughing in his blood, the blue-haired demon lord affirms that it will be the hero who will be judged. In such a case, he throws his hands in the air, commanding someone to punish Dantalion, because he had violated the common law, and if the citizens decided not to obey the command, he affirmed that he would end them all. He prides himself on the situation, judging Dantalion as a fool who has no right to judge him. When our hero approaches his fellow demon lord while laughing, the protagonist asserts that Andromalius was being very arrogant even when he had understood everything wrong. That demon lord, in turn, really gets confused with what is being said. And again calling for the attention of the people, Dantalion affirms that in the name of the demon lords, he will judge Andromalius, which makes everyone uneasy. Our hero affirms that he will leave the verdict to none other than the people themselves. and begins to explain the conditions while everyone watches attentively. Dantalian eloquently says that the only reason they are able to live currently is because of the people. However, that man was simply born as a demon lord, understanding the real meaning of power, and moreover, instead of throwing his tasks, he spent all this time drinking in bars and gambling in casinos. So finally he dared to raise his can against the weakest. So what kind of demon lord is that? In the words of our protagonist, the world does not exist for people like him, but rather for people like the citizens of that land. The natives gradually adhere to the hero's speech, and he asks whether for this land and for the future of the nation, such a man truly deserves to live. Then he throws the decision to all that, saying it is time for them to rise as the heroes of Manhwa. With mirrors on edge after hearing such a declaration, Andromalius tells the hero to shut up and asks the citizens to follow his commands. He continues his tantrum while cursing everyone who tries to force them to follow his desires. However, Dantalian simply provokes his fellow demon lord by questioning why he is panicking and humiliating himself to this level. Asserting he already knows the reason, our hero surmises it must be because of the small wound he made on Andromalius. Thus, at the moment, the blue-haired demon cannot see anything and then became afraid of being defenseless. Thanks to such an insult to his honor for being incapacitated, Andromalius can only insult the protagonist back, telling him to shut up repeatedly. However, Dantalian affirmed he had already understood because that meant if someone decided to finish him off, he would not know who was trembling with rage. Andromalius enters into despair, and a few seconds after that, he is impaled by someone from behind. After receiving the attack, the blue-haired demon lord asked who had done this to him. However, the citizen, in a heap of emotions, decides not to answer the question. Before anything else, our hero approaches, placing his hands against Andromalius' shoulders. He claims that so far, everything has been according to his plans. The man has his sincere thanks. With such a declaration, Andromalius could not believe what our hero was saying. But upon analyzing the sound of the place, he realized a cruel reality. Dantalian was no longer there, and at the moment, all that could be heard were angry people preparing for a collected attack against him. At that time, all that remains for the blind demon lord is to plead for his life and hope for compassion from the village citizens. In an act of clemency, Andromalius questioned the local population about their decision and asked them to reconsider. But the man's fate is already sealed, and Dantalian just laughs, saying, "Reap what you sow." Moreover, this is a classic case of well-deserved karma. With his work finished there, Dantalian calls his colleagues because it's time to leave. In contrast with his departure, Andromalius is finally judged for the crimes he committed with brutality proportional to what he exercised on others. After moving away a bit from the central region of the events, Dantalian announces he's a bit tired, so he apologizes for dinner having to wait for the next day. His companions, however, are very understanding and agree that our hero should rest a bit. Among them, the blonde says she will guide him to the logic. But upon looking around, Dantalian realizes someone is missing among them. Quickly, the blonde witch notices Beatrice's absence and awkwardly apologizes because she has a tendency to wander off without giving explanations. Our protagonist takes this information seriously, but in the end says it's all right. Because the most important thing at the moment is that Dantalian has a request for the Berbier sisters, which leaves the blonde confused. Elsewhere, a woman comments that she certainly was not expecting this besides being graced by the show scene. She mentions the name of Dantalian with curiosity and thinks that the next show will be even bigger. Among houses and buildings, a certain building stands out. Inside it, a man thinks that the next day will already be Walpurgis this night. But he remembers that he has not been able to make contact with Lord Ivar for an entire week. In front of the iron door, the goblin calls for his Lord Ivar, and he opened it slowly and carefully, questioning if he had not yet returned. Disregarding the coffins in the place, the goblin finds himself it has seemingly been real. So he believes the Lord is still not back, wondering where he might be. He hears a strange noise that catches his attention. At the highest window of the place, an employee spots a witch sitting cross-legged, which leaves him astonished. The same, in turn, with a frightening look, questions Torkel if he was sure he was really taking care of the company. The witch then jumps from the window, lands on the ground. Torkel initially stutters but asks where the hell he was, thus revealing that little witch is his Lord Ivar. While laughing, she said she had gone to see Lapis and Dantalian with her own eyes, hadn't observed them very well. Intrigued to know what his master had discovered, Torkel asked what he did there. However, it is recorded that Ivar has not yet discovered anything about the plague. Nevertheless, he managed to witness something quite interesting at the Herm's court, which left Torkel eager for the response. In his opinion, he believed he had somewhat underestimated Dantalian. However, he's still lost in his agony of love, which means that his current weakness is Lapis. Ivar calls for Torkel and asks to be updated on the situation with Lady Payment. Promptly, the goblin informs that Lady Payment promised to support them and that she would spare no effort to help them. That said, Ivar bursts into laughter as he enters his coffin. And finally, he said he understood, closing the door. From the coffin, a powerful purple aura emanates throughout the place. Within the aura, blue energy spheres emerge, initiating a transformation. Continuing his laughter, Ivar now prepares to exit the coffin. But with his real appearance, he then asks to communicate what he is about to say word for word to Lady Payment. And nostalgically, he thinks it has been 100 years since he has waited so long for a day like he waits tomorrow. 24 hours after the Andromalius incident, the Walpurgis night day finally arrives. The guards are on alert in the castle to ensure the safety of the guests. It is reported that the rank 9 demon lord has arrived, so everyone should prepare. Among the crowd, some are astonished while others marvel at the lord's arrival. 2 white horses pull the carriage of the highly important rank 9. As they approach the location, they are revered by guests wearing masquerade masks. Laughing, the demon lord begins to descend the stairs while thanking them for receiving her, and one of the men says that the pleasure is all theirs. For they have been waiting for her arrival, the infamous and grand Lady Payment. She asked if the men had finished making the arrangements with Ivar, and the one who received her informs that everything went well. As everything seemed to be going right, all that remained was to enjoy the moment. But still not seeing any familiar faces makes her uncomfortable, thinking she might have arrived a bit early. Suddenly, a man with a mustache asks everyone to clear the way as the next demon lord has arrived. Payman becomes curious about the identity of the next lord. Angry black horses approach, causing a commotion that makes everyone anxious. Suddenly, the carriage driver stops, and the horses their aggressive movement. After parking at the location, the demon lord kicks the carriage door with all her might, throwing it far away. She says that her butt hurts for sitting so long, leaving everyone confused. She exits the carriage, saying that everything smells like crap. This person is the demon lord Barbatos, goddess of black magic and diseases. Extremely irritated, she says a Payman who stares back. With clear mockery in her voice, Barbatos recognizes her colleague as the harlot of nobility. Payman in turn also welcomes her, saying that her tastes remain questionable as always. Barbatos sarcastically comments that she heard the demon lord slept with a centaur, and that she looked a bit worn out afterward. Ekman in turn criticizes the girl's indecent behavior in such a situation and says that she should start trying to act like an adult. With a body like that, it must be difficult for her to find a partner, which means she will probably continue to be childish forever. Ben Payman, in an ultimatum, says that it would be better if Barbatos stopped this habit of bullying than others. This makes her extremely angry, causing her to say that she would call off the big fat bust that Payman has right now. However, attention is again drawn to the man with the mustache who states that another demon lord has arrived. Very irritated, Barbatos turns to see who it is. Hero says that if Walla is not well, she could hold his hand. They exit the carriage, leaving everyone shocked to witness the rumored demon lord. After looking at Barbatos, Lala becomes a little intimidating and questions her king about these people. However, he says he already knows, and that apparently everyone there already knows them. Confident about how he will handle the situation, Dantalion comforts his companion, saying she doesn't need to be afraid. The two demon lords at the location cannot help but stare at our protagonist. However, he ignores them and merely calls Lala to move forward. On Walpurgis night, exactly 30 minutes before arriving at the location. Inside the carriage, Walla tells her king that she believes she cannot attend the event. Dantalion in turn questions what she said, asking if his companion is nervous, because this type of thing is not in her nature. The hero, a little disheartened, says there will be a ball before the meeting, and he asks who will be his partner. She does not go, questioning if she wants him to go alone. The declaration makes Lapis considerably upset. In such a case, Italian questions if she is angry because of what happened the day before. And remember, because Lal recalls the entire loving speech the protagonist gave her, saying he loved her. And our hero states that he had no choice while she blushes in the corner. After a period of silence, Lapis says that the protagonist is wrong because the Night of Walpurgis is an event that only high-ranking demon boards can attend. Therefore, placing someone like her in a place like this would be outrageous. Our hero realizes that she is still worried about this and assures her that everything is fine. Because now Lapis is officially his fiancé, so she should have more confidence. Now they are the most talked about couple in the world, thus they cannot disappoint those eager to see them. After hearing this, Lala swallows hard and doesn't know what the hell her king is thinking. She believed that this whole lover thing was just for him to have a reason to borrow money. Moreover, depending on how the meeting goes, a second war could be initiated because anything in there can affect the lives of thousands of people. This time the topic would be the plague, and then yesterday's incident happened. In this case, Lapis wonders how her king can still be so calm even in such a situation. After some time, it is reported that they have arrived at the destination. Lala calls Dantalion's attention and watches her impressed by the very important guests at the event. Laughing, our hero begins to descend the carriage stairs, and Lala tries to stop him, saying she should go first. However, in an act of chivalry, our hero descends, extending his hand to his companion and inviting her to come out. So while viewing the immensity of that place, all that remained from Lapis is to hold her king's hand and embark on the experience. But completely breaking the move, she declines the help and descends alone, trying not to draw attention. Changing the subject, Dantalion begins to think about the cold, which is related to something that will happen soon. And Lala, a little anxious, calls her king, informing him that there are many important people there. The two demon lords turn, looking directly at our protagonist and his companion, and he says that he already knows while walking towards them. Standing in front of the two, Dantalion greets Miss Payman and Miss Barbatos, stating it is a pleasure to meet them. With a malicious look, he introduces himself as the rank 71 demon lord Dantalion. However, Barbatos gets irritated, telling this low-ranking trash not to speak to her because she's in a bad mood at the moment. Contrary to expectations, our hero vows and apologizes, saying that as he is new, he might make such mistakes. However, he explained that he had never seen such important people as the two of them, so he couldn't pass by without greeting them. In the end, with the same malicious look as before, Dantalion reiterates his apologies in case he offended the lady in any way. A bit suspicious, Barbatos thinks that this guy is different. And after sorting a bit, she decides to leave because nothing too serious happened. This attitude catches Lapis' attention, and our hero remains calculative about the situation. Barbatos thinks that this guy is low-ranking, but even so, she and Payman have to stay close to him besides he's not scared of quite the opposite. Given this, she smiles, realizing the potential in the man who has been much talked about lately, and she walks past Payman while keeping her laughter loud and clear. Payman understands the hidden meaning in her colleague's reaction, while placing the fan over her face, thinks that all of this is very irritating. After Barbatos' departure, Payman approaches, stating that she hopes what she's about to say does not offend our hero. But in recent days, she had heard a lot from Lord Dantalion. The protagonist stares at her with a blank expression, and she comments about the person behind him. This person in turn reveres Payman, informing her of serving Lord Dantalion and introducing herself as Lapis Lazuli. After witnessing all that, Payman says that the girl does not need to be so formal, because everything is fine. And at the same time, she places the fan on the girl's face, complimenting the beauty of such a young face. The protagonist apparently does not like what is happening, but tries to maintain appearances, complimenting the demon lord for her incomparable beauty. Anna is a bit pleased with the compliment and starts laughing. As she approaches the protagonist, she also compliments him, saying that he's quite handsome, and our hero accepts this gracefully, stating he's grateful. But as she approaches even more, the woman presses her bust against Dantalian's chest, saying she would like to have another kind of conversation with him at some point. After this unexpected invitation, Payman steps back and says goodbye, stating that they will see each other later. Both Dantalian and Lapis initially remain neutral about the incident. However, the protagonist quickly changes his expression, commenting that the event just now was interesting. Then he looks at his companion, but she stares at him with disapproval and disgust. After commenting that Lawless and pale, Dantalian thinks that no matter how many lives he has, they are never enough. At the ball inside the castle, some were dancing while others were conversing with each other. The protagonist, on the other hand, says that everything is very good and praises the place for being a good meeting spot. However, something intrigued him, making him call Lapis and ask if she had noticed it too. After she confirms, Dantalian begins to understand his current situation. At the moment, there is no way to escape, and from now on, it seems that everyone there will be paying attention to them. In the ballroom, it was evident that although people were trying to appear indifferent, they were paying attention to the protagonists. Given this, Dantalian thinks that they cannot escape this and feels like an animal in a zoo. So the question now is whether they really deserve all this attention, because everyone is looking at them as if they were rare animals. They are looking at them like fierce beasts before devouring their prey. A question arises from our hero who asks Lala if all participants are connected with the company, but she says she doesn't know if men owned the boss and the high-ranking staff have access to customer information. However, according to the participant list, about 40% of the participants belong to Miss Payman's faction. Similarly, another 40% belong to Lady Barbatos' faction, and the other 20% either belong to Lord Marmus' faction or are unaffiliated. After saying he understood, Dantalian moves around, trying to think about how many of these people are actually company lackeys. In this case, he tries to put himself in the place in the firm, and being one, how could he escape? Suddenly, all the lights in the place go out in a widespread incident. Quickly, the guests begin to complain, saying they can't see anything, but our hero remains calm and indifferent to the excitement. Amidst the darkness, a blue light begins to appear, blossoming among various fire lanterns. The protagonists become curious and suspicious about what will follow from this. Then a man with a cane approaches the main hall, saying he wants to greet everyone present, thus welcoming them. The man places his hand on his chest, stating that he will have the honor of presiding over the meeting tonight. He introduces himself as Ivor Rodrock from the Kumkuspa Company, and our hero can barely contain his excitement upon witnessing such a man. The Italian calls his companion, asks if that gentleman is really Ivor Rodrock. She confirms, saying that he is the richest man in the demonic world, an ancient vampire and owner of the Kumkuspa Company, and that because of her current lord, she had to betray her former boss. At the same time, placing his hands over his mouth and laughing, the protagonist thinks that this is how it would be, with the boss himself having appeared at the scene. Ivar, for his part, thinks he has been waiting a long time for this, and that he finally found his servant, Lapis Lazuli. Despite being a filthy half-blood, she deceived him and even became a demon lord's lover. But that is enough, because today he will witness her downfall. The man calls everyone's attention and declares the start of Wall Purchase Night. Suddenly, someone will call on an old geezer, saying he has been barking for too long. This person is Gardahouse, who is getting drunk with a bottle of wine. Even this, but the protagonist and Ivar look at the girl with disgust. Barbatos, for her part, says she had a long trip and wanted to rest a bit, and despite everything, it truly wasn't cool to have a sticky old man with terrible breath as a host. While wiping her lips with the wine, the girl says she feels sick, so she asks someone to give her something to drink, stating she can't stand Ivar's weak and boring hospitality. Dantalian just watches while rooting for Barbatos, and Ivar says he knows how the demon lord peeps. However, she gets irritated, questioning if the old man is challenging her, but she denies very cordially. And after looking to the side, he notices the arrival of a new member to the space. It's Payman, who warns Barbatos to be careful, but she says. With an air of superiority, she says she feels ashamed to be of the same race as her, because Ivar prepared this beautiful place just for them. After finishing her wine bottle, the short demon lord gets irritated by that woman interfering in her affairs again. One without any sense of cause and effect, she throws her bottle at Payman. The bottle right in front of Payman, causing drops to splash onto her body. Even after all this, Barbatos does not back down and tells her colleague to go home and play with the centaurs instead of acting like she's in charge of something. Payman criticizing the girl's attitude and comparing her vulgarity to that of a child, and also making a comparison with her body shape. She says that adults understand this thing called etiquette, but supposes it's something Barbatos will never comprehend. The name called the child deeply irritates Barbatos, who considers fighting the demon lord. Noticing her enemy is shaken, Payman doesn't waste time and continues to mock her, asking if she is sad about it. At this moment, Barbatos enters a total frenzy, almost losing control of her actions. The tension between the two increases, making the atmosphere heavy. However, someone decides to intervene in the clash between the two high-ranking demon lords. The man imposes himself, advising that the two should stay quiet for now. This man is Marmus, the infamous rank 5 demon lord of nobility. After being scolded by a higher-ranking demon lord, the two stop fighting and disperse from the area. Marmus then apologizes and asks Ivar to continue with what he was saying earlier. Ivar, in turn, is positively surprised by this lord and thinks that now finally all the necessary people are there. With the meeting finally underway, everyone stare at each other in the conference room. Lapis noticed that Dantalian was excited by the situation beside him as he observed the true power of the demon lords before him. knowing that as a low-level demon, just one wrong move would be enough for him to end up being cut to pieces by everyone there. As he began to ponder what Ivar might be planning to do there, Dantalion, for some reason, felt uneasy, as if something was slipping from his view, and Payman interrupted his thoughts, informing him that before anything could begin, they needed to know something important. Ivar and Mormos asked her to please tell them what it was. She then mentioned that Andromedus had been found dead that morning. Everyone was shocked by the information as Payman explained that his body had been mutilated and that, in fact, he had been murdered. The demons couldn't believe what she was saying, and Mormos approached her, asking Payman to confirm what she had just said. The woman replied, stating that she had solid evidence, which led Mormos to question if she knew who the killer was. Payman immediately informed them that the executioner of the demon had been the people of Nilfheim themselves. However, there was indeed someone behind the scenes encouraging it to happen, and that someone was one of the people present there. Lepus was startled by what the woman had said, but Dantalion calmed her down, telling her she didn't need to be afraid. He tried to analyze the situation, where Payman seemed to want to destroy him by making such a lengthy speech to explain everything in detail. The Jews said she, the company, and Ivar were working together, somehow knowing exactly what had happened. Trying to piece together the puzzle, he tried to recall any moment when another demon lord had been watching them and for how long this had been going on. He realized that they had been watched all along in some way as he looked at Payman, wondering how she had done it. When Payman stared back at him, it seemed he had finally understood everything that had happened. Ivar asked her who had then made the people kill Andromedus, and Payman, with a menacing gaze, proclaimed that the person who had manipulated the people, encouraging them to kill Andromedus, was the 71st demon Dantalion. Everyone immediately stared at the protagonist beside Lepus, who now had a more demonic expression, just like Payman's. The people around couldn't believe that a demon lord had killed someone of the same race, and amid the noise, Ivar tried to control the situation. Marbus then informed Payman that if this incident were true, it could end up affecting the entire order of the demon world. But the woman kneeled, holding her dress as she swore she had spoken nothing but the truth. And she accused Dantalion of committing the crime, proposing that a hearing be held right there. Ivar, hearing this, remembered that he had already prepared the witnesses, giving the protagonist no chance to escape the trap set by the two of them. He had decided to ask Dantalion directly if he had any objections to what had been said about him so far. Everyone was anxious as they waited for his response, but to everyone's surprise, he replied laughing, saying he had no objections, taking full responsibility for the incident and confessing to the murder. Piecing together the situation, it became clear that Ivar's goal was to join forces with Payman, using the Andromedus incident as an excuse for this, with the intent to destroy Dantalion and steal a black herb capable of curing the plague that had emerged. But the entire situation was a mere coincidence in which he had gotten involved, as meeting Andromedus had not been part of his initial plans, thus that having discovered what had happened could only mean one thing. From the beginning, someone had been watching his group, and the one who had been watching had also disappeared afterward. That someone was one of the witches from the Burger sisters, named Beatrice. Dantalion still couldn't understand why it happened. For, if Payman was on their side, there would have been no need to go through all these problems. It would have been simpler just to attack him directly, as he was just a low-ranking, unimportant demon lord. While reflecting on everything, he deduced that maybe, in fact, they couldn't do that, and that's why they had orchestrated the entire meeting. They needed the Walpurgis night happening due to Payman's actions, who had been watching Dantalion since he had arrived at the place. This led Dantalion to realize that the true reason for his earlier discomfort was the fact that their main target wasn't him. So he began to wonder who the real target of the two of them was. Thinking about all the events up until that point and the current problem, being the plague, he deduced that it was completely impossible to predict a plague, making it natural for them to think that someone had intentionally created it. But if it had been created by someone, perhaps the same person Payman had targeted from the beginning was responsible, the goddess of black magic and diseases called Barbahos. Assuming that the plan of the two was to accuse her of being the real culprit behind it all, fully understanding the situation. Being just a low-ranking demon, he was merely a puppet of someone truly powerful, acting on behalf of Barbatos. And because of this, they had been merely watching him closely instead of attacking. For, if they had attacked Dantalion earlier, they would have risked starting a direct war against the demoness Barbatos. The meeting happening now made more sense, with nobles and demon lords present. Ivar and Payman intended to attack him directly until he relented and confessed his possible connection to Barbatos. But with so many important people in the place, the demoness would simply deny her connection to him, leaving her unable to help him afterward. This would lead him to be condemned for creating the plague and taking the cure herbs for himself, a cunning act with no support. Seeing Ivar's plan, he even began to feel respect for the man, saying he seemed different from his opponents so far, being the strongest man Dantalion had faced until that moment with a sharp mind. However, none of that really mattered in the end. If they were after Barbatos, that only meant she wasn't with them, and he just needed to find out if Marbus had already taken a side. But being a high-ranking and noble demon leader, if he knew of Ivar's plan, he would question the demoness directly about the disease, which meant that Ivar and Payman were working together to bring down Dantalion, believing he was the vulnerability in all of this. And knowing this, he decided that he would show how things would really happen there. Returning to the present, after he had agreed to the murder of Andromedus, everyone was taken by surprise by his confession. Ivar, startled, asked what he had just said, wondering if he had misunderstood something, but the demon reiterated his words. And asking Ivar if the elder had any problem with that confession, he had left the old man confused. He continued hearing Dantalion say that he had his reasons for doing so as well, requesting that a hearing be held, as had been planned earlier. The demon raised a finger, wanting to ask for one more thing before everything began. He knew that Ivar, being the host of the meeting, would be in a very comfortable position to be the judge of everything, pretending to be neutral. Therefore, he ended up calling Lord Marbas and asked if, in a dispute between demon lords, it wouldn't be natural for another of them to act as the jury. He then politely requested that Marbas take on that role as he was the highest-ranking demon present there. Marbas agreed to that and said, in turn, to Ivar that the situation was too much for the elder to handle, taking over the host role to resolve everything. Ivar and Payman agreed to the terms, though clearly dissatisfied with the situation that hadn't gone as planned for them. With the matter entrusted to the noble, the trial began. Marbas told Dantalion that if he wanted to prove his innocence, he should walk to the center, to which he walked toward the spot while conversing with Lapis, hinting that the two of them had planned something. Lapis didn't understand how he could be laughing at his current situation, while Dantalion and Payman stared at each other fiercely as they approached one another for the trial. Payman, upon getting close to Dantalion, said she would like to express her gratitude for him accepting her request for a hearing, to which he responded, saying that it was nothing, as he also wanted to talk to her for some time. Dantalion, confident, felt as if he were in a medieval duel, challenging Payman as his rival in his thoughts. Marbas then started the hearing, informing that both sides would be heard, and then it would be decided who was right by a majority vote. Dantalion, hearing this, felt a bit apprehensive as he observed the demons watching everything clearly not on his side. For according to Lapis, 40% of the people there were aligned with Payman. In terms of brute strength, he was nowhere near the woman, who practically had an army by her side there at the trial to support her. This made him decide to use the only power he had at the moment, which was the knowledge he had obtained from the game Dungeon Assault. With the menu appearing above Payman's head due to the Apostle of Aphrodite used by Dantalion, some basic information about her is revealed. He remembers that this ability at its maximum level could even read people's minds. But for now, as he still had it only at level 1, the only available information was the affinity level with the people around her. Even though most of the affinity statuses with the other demons were at 0, Dantalion wasn't discouraged, saying that this was already enough. Marbas, acting as the mediator of the situation, started by giving Payman the right to question Dantalion about her accusations. She then began asking about him being in the Hermes district in Niflheim the day before. And even though she knew the other person was a demon lord, Dantalion skillfully convinced the people to kill him on the spot. The boy responded that Payman's story was true and decided to also tell the facts from his own perspective, saying to everyone that he had blinded Andromedus before he died, which shocked everyone since common law still applied to him. She said that even if the people had not been able to handle Andromedus, regardless of whether he was a demon lord or not, he still had hit his heart. The affinity of all the demons present, which was already not very high, began to drop even further after hearing this. And Ivar began to laugh at the situation, asking if the boy had completely lost his way after hearing his entire speech up to that point. Payman warned Dantalion to be more careful with how he spoke, calling a demon lord trash in such a manner. But he responded saying that, unfortunately, that wouldn't be possible, because Dantalion would continue cursing repeatedly, as trash like him deserved to die. And one of the protagonists spoke, for more his affinity with the rest of the people decreased. And Payman, hearing these insults, began to get irritated with Dantalion, saying that regardless of everything, Andromedus was still one of them. Dantalion, upon hearing this, responded that he disagreed with Payman's opinion, saying that, in fact, Andromedus was not one of them but a disgrace. Death was still not enough, and because of that, he wished, in succession, that the demons of hell would violate that wretched soul for all eternity. Complaining afterward, commenting that he was tired of hearing Payman defend the demon lord he called trash once again. This ended up angering the woman, instantly losing 40 points of affinity with him. Payman screamed at the boy to immediately change the way he was speaking, while his affinity with everyone continued to drop. Marbas, hearing Dantalion's words, interrupted the boy, saying that this was a noble place and that she was right, and he needed to be careful with what he said. And Dantalion, laughing at all of them, placed his right hand on his chest and bowed, apologizing to Marbas. Explaining that he seemed to have been unable to contain his emotions, he reflected on what he was actually doing, revealing that, in fact, his plan wasn't to gain affinity with Payman, but rather with her enemy, Barbatos, whose affinity had already increased by 50 points by now. With his plan working so far, we see Barbatos drinking while watching everything happily. Since the decision would be made by majority vote and 40% of the people in his opponent's faction, Payman would vote against him. He needed to gain the support of Marbas' 20% or Barbatos' other 40%, which was absolutely crucial to his strategy. And for that, he decided he would respond to Payman in a way that would make her angry to please Barbatos, wondering what she was thinking at that moment. She, who had almost struck Payman a few moments ago, was now watching Dantalion finish off Payman himself, proceeding with his plan. The demon placed his hand on his chest again and apologized to Payman after having already made her angry. He then asked her to forgive his rudeness, also apologizing to the people present, who were watching everything in silence. Everyone seemed a bit confused by his actions, as he informed them that he had never intended to disrespect any of them, while explaining that he was just an immature man who couldn't control himself, being merely a low-ranking demon, making himself seem pitiful. With no achievements or titles, he was just a nobody. However, even he wouldn't dare raise a hand against an elder or kill a child just because they didn't greet him. Everyone stood in shock, their mouths agape at his speech in deep silence, until Marbas asked where he was trying to go with all of this. Dantalion, with his hand on his face, began to laugh and asked everyone if they still weren't aware of the number of people killed by Andromedus in Niflheim, being nothing less than 54 people, which left everyone distressed upon discovering that among that number of victims were 12 children. Telling a story about Andromedus when he was drunk, doing things that even the worst demons would hesitate to do. He even found a woman in the sewers, a victim of this insolent man. And if they were to include the injured as well, the number of victims of the demon lord would reach a total of 327. These were only the cases that Dantalion was aware of. Marbas, after hearing all this, asked if the stories he told were true, and Dantalion replied yes, saying they had been investigated by his vassal. And while remembering what he had agreed with Lapis earlier, he admitted that he had exaggerated a little, but it didn't matter because the dead told no tales. He began to explain his incident with Andromachus, recounting how yesterday he had heard an old man screaming in pain. And when he turned around, he came face to face with Andromachus, who started to fight with Dantalion, asking confrontationally where he was looking. Andromachus approached him, and then Dantalion discovered that he was a demon lord, being attacked shortly after. But instead of hitting him, Andromachus chose to strike the person Dantalion loved with a kick to the stomach. After helping Lapis up, he returned to punch Andromachus' face over and over again and again, stopping for a moment. Then he asked Lady Payman, who, looking at him with hatred, heard his question about what he should have done in that situation. When he saw his beloved subjected to such an irrational act of violence, he questioned her if the best option was to stand still while watching what was happening. Payman, who, unlike the other demon lords, had been especially friendly with humans, was possibly worried about the plague because of those who were suffering from it all, unlike Ivar, who believed that the culprits behind all of it were truly him and Barbatos, unable to forgive them for it. Knowing all of this, he praised in his mind the woman's sense of justice, which was truly admirable but could also become a weakness. Thus, it was a true double-edged sword. With full control of the situation, he had turned it into a true public execution. Shouting, he asked them to let him repeat once more what he had said. And he affirmed that Andromachus was such a despicable man that he didn't have the right to be called a demon lord. And if things continued as they were, the number of victims would continue to rise even more, saying that the focus should be on his victims. Because of this, he asked the people if Andromachus truly deserved to die or not. The crowd, who had only been listening in silence, remained shocked by everything they were hearing. And Dantalion approached Payman, asking if, at that moment, she still considered that man one of them, informing her that the image of the demon lords could be tarnished because of that piece of trash, questioning her if she would still defend him. Dantalion waited for her response to his questions, with Payman beginning to panic as her plans slipped out of control. Thinking that she would never truly associate herself with a man like Andromachus, she got lost in her thoughts, unable to find the right answer to the situation. And being pressured, she decided to be honest and say that Dantalion was actually right, which made Barbatos burst out laughing in the background, watching it all. She praised Dantalion, calling him only by his number, and thanked him for getting rid of that pest on behalf of all of them. While asking everyone there who had been watching everything if they didn't also agree with what they had heard. She began laughing uncontrollably as the crowd started to change their minds about everything they were seeing, which ended up shocking Ivar and some other nobles. Lapis, who also didn't understand much, watched everything and wondered what was really happening in front of her. While Lapis wondered what Dantalion was up to, Barbatos appeared laughing uncontrollably with some other people in the background. She also said after hearing the whole story that she had also wanted to kill Andromachus, who had actually been hiding from her for some time. And feeling happy about Andromachus' death, the demoness began applauding Dantalion for his actions. Realizing she was doing it alone, she asked everyone there if they would side with that scoundrel Andromachus, glaring at them with a demonic look. Everyone then, in fear of her, applauded alongside the demoness with expressions of shock, not knowing what might happen next. Barbatos, seeing this, said that it was a blessed day as she tried to persuade everyone present, commenting on wondering what would happen if the nobles and lords discovered that the people there had defended such acts on Walpurgis Night. More and more people began applauding, analyzing the new situation they found themselves in. While Barbatos gave her small political speech, pointing a finger at Dantalion, she stated that she was sure that at that very moment, the people in Niflheim would be praising the demon as a savior, not only for killing a demon lord, but also for breaking the law just to protect the person he loved, calling him a hero. She laughed as she realized that in this whole story, a demon lord had turned into a hero, something brilliant. And she asked Payman what she thought about all of it, who was still confused by the situation spiraling out of her control. Payman wondered why the man who had broken one of the most respected laws of that world was being applauded for it right in front of her. And Marbas, seeing all the noise and confusion, shouted, ordering everyone there to be silent. He then said that this had disrupted the order of the hearing, and that it could not happen again. The crowd, afraid of his shouts, obeyed his order along with Barbatos, who had genuinely been impressed with Dantalion because in low-ranking demons, there were usually nothing but trash. As she thought to herself that it had been a while since someone useful like him had appeared, she replied to Marbas that she had no intention of interrupting the hearing. Marbas then turned his head toward Payman, who was clearly defeated, and asked for the hearing to be concluded right there. But trying to resolve it somehow, the woman asked the host to wait a little longer. He asked if there was still something she wanted to discuss, and Payman responded by saying that she had not finished questioning Dantalion. Marbas commented on how they had been friends for over 500 years, or both knew each other well. Because of this, he couldn't understand why she was trying to defend Andromachus. As usually, she would be the one to despise that kind of person. With no options left, Payman looked at Barbatos, who was laughing at her, which only made the woman even more irritated. Still unable to comprehend how the situation had gotten to the point where they were the real villains, she knelt, placing her clenched fist on the ground while begging Marbas for one last chance. Dantalion stifled his laughter as he watched this, thinking that everything had happened exactly as he had predicted. And with the right time approaching, he glanced at Lapis in the background, making a hand signal behind his back. Lapis, understanding the signal, began walking away from the place while Payman informed all the nobles present that night that she had not yet shared everything she knew, which left everyone shocked. She then revealed the problem with the plague that had suddenly appeared one day and quickly spread across the entire continent. With the death toll rising every day, Payman told everyone that, in fact, it had been spread intentionally by someone, and that the person behind it all was the demon named Dantalion. Dantalian, seeing the situation, decided it was time to finally use his hidden trick. While introducing that Ivar and Payman had planned to say this from the beginning, with the Andrew Mullis matter merely serving as an appetizer for them. Turning his face, he found the elder standing in front of him, sensing that the real battle was about to begin. Marbas, hearing Payman's words, asked her if she had any evidence to back up what she had just said. This pleased Ivar, as the woman had finally gotten back on track, regaining her posture and continuing with the plan. Payman explained that the plague in question was killing not only humans, but demons as well. And the good news was that there was a cure for all of it, commenting on the existence of the black herb. With that, she asked everyone who had been the first to realize that this medicinal plant could be used to cure the plague. She revealed that the person in question was in the room and went by the name Dantalian. The most interesting fact of all was that he had bought up the entire stock of these plants even before the plague began. The crowd in the room was a bit confused by what they were hearing, as they listened to Payman explaining that not only did he know when the plague would emerge, but he also knew how to cure it. Knowing beforehand the cure for a disease that didn't even exist yet, with no explanation for it, she questioned him about it. The only logical answer being that Dantalian himself had spread the plague. Hearing all of that, the crowd began to wonder if what was said was real or even possible. Payman, now more focused than ever, continued, stating that Dantalian had all along a consultant from Ivar's company by his side. She explained that it was through this consultant that he had acquired all the black herbs, and with that she could prove without hiding any details how he had obtained such a product. Everyone fell silent after the woman's words until Morbus turned to Ivar, asking him if this was true. Ivar responded, saying that he feared to claim what was true or false without certainty when making such a decision before the nobleman present. However, if ordered to do so, he would provide all the necessary evidence for verification. Morbus, hearing this, asked if he could arrange for the evidence at that moment, to which Ivar replied yes. Ivar looked at the boy who was laughing at the situation, thinking that he would soon bring an end to that being. But suddenly, something happened, interrupting the meeting. An apology came from the crowd a bit further back from the center of the room. A guard seemed to be trying to make his way through, causing a slight commotion in the room. Marbes, acknowledging the interruption, stated that the meeting was a Walpurgis Mine event and asked the person to explain themselves. A soldier approached the host and informed him that the headquarters of the Kimkuska company had been attacked. Ivar, terrified by the news, began to listen to the story the guard was telling. He explained that a sound resembling an explosion had been heard, followed by smoke rising from the upper part of the company's headquarters, a section where Ivar stored his personal collection of bodies. He apologized, kneeling before Marbes, pleading to be allowed to leave and handle the situation. Marbes asked the man to stand, understanding his situation, but allowed him only 15 minutes of absence. For, normally, he wouldn't even interrupt such a sacred meeting, making this an exception. Ivar thanked the man for his generous consideration and, clutching his cane, rose and asked everyone to step aside for him. Barbatos, seeing the man's desperation, began to laugh at him, which irritated Payman once again. Dantalian, meanwhile, began walking away from the center of the room. Payman, without having the end of her judgment declared, asked him to stay right where he was. She confronted the demon, who said he was merely going out to get some fresh air, assuring her he wasn't fleeing and that she had no reason to worry. As Dantalian went to get his fresh air, Ivar searched for Torkel, and upon finding his friend, he angrily asked what was happening at the headquarters. Torkel, clueless about the situation, responded that he didn't know anything yet, and Ivar instructed him to send the remaining servants and soldiers to the headquarters. He obeyed the orders and questioned Ivar about what he intended to do next. Ivar informed him that he was heading to the observation deck, where he could see everything. In disbelief, Ivar tried to understand who would attack his company headquarters on Walpurgis night. His enemy had apparently taken advantage of the situation, knowing the place was less guarded, worrying the demon about the state of his coffin collection. Due to his age, climbing the stairs seemed difficult, so he headed for the observatory. Determined to move everything once the meeting ended, he swore never to forgive those responsible for this new problem. Ivar reached a certain high point and indeed saw smoke rising from the top of his headquarters. At that moment, he heard the voice of another person, who seemed to be waiting for him in the same place. Turning toward the voice, he found himself face to face with Dantalian. The demon remarked that with Ivar's power, you could surely see his room, which made the elder wonder what the boy's sudden appearance there meant. Knowing that Ivar would go to that place, Dantalian surprised him by appearing there as well. The elder began to question why he was there, trying to make sense of the situation, while Dantalian stared at the man, laughing. 10 minutes before all of this, we see a flashback of the three witches above Kunkuska's headquarters. The Baromir sisters were asking one another if they were really going to do it, as they seemed to be waiting for some sort of signal to be given. Even with doubts about everything, they decided to follow Dantalian's will, who had told them something interesting in their last conversation. After asking them to attack Kunkuska's headquarters, he had informed them that the matter would also be of interest to the witches. They didn't immediately understand what he meant, but Dantalian explained that Beechers, who had disappeared, might be at that location already dead. Because of this, one of the sisters said that if Dantalian was right, she would never forgive Ivar. However, up until that moment, they still weren't sure if the story he told was true, but they would eventually find out by going to the site. The witches had nothing to fear, for even though they were of low rank, this was still a direct request from a demon lord. As they debated this, some lights could be seen at the top of the meeting location, with Lapis pointing her finger upward. This was the signal they had been waiting for since the beginning, and they immediately launched the attack. Returning to the present, Ivar and Dantalian stared at each other as the old man tried to understand what he was doing there. He began looking around, trying to spot someone else, fearing that Barbatos might be hiding somewhere too. But being in the middle of a conference, Matthew would be foolish enough to launch a direct attack against him. Dantalian approached the elder, walking closer, telling him that he needn't worry, as it was just the two of them at that moment. He then informed him that he wanted to have an honest and open conversation with him. Ivar, listening to all of this, tried to analyze the situation and commented on the attack on his company, something he couldn't believe. Dantalian, seizing the opportunity, admitted that he was the one who orchestrated the attack, which enraged the man. He explained that he had done it just to have a private conversation with Ivar, with no intention of destroying his company. Without it all, there would have been no opportunity to do what he was doing away from prying eyes. His company had been slightly damaged for this purpose, which prompted Dantalion to apologize to Ivar, asking him to understand his situation. Ivar, hearing this, began to lose control, realizing he had been made a fool, trying to figure out what Dantalion wanted to talk about so badly that he did this. He then decided that he would completely destroy Dantalion no matter what the cost. The Elder tried to avoid playing his game, saying that there was nothing to discuss there, for they would simply relay the information as they had been instructed earlier by Lord Marbus. Dantalion expressed regret that their conversation would end like that, especially since it was the first time he had spoken to the man face to face. Ivar said he felt the same while lamenting everything that had happened. Upon hearing Ivar saying he felt the same way, Dantalion began to question him about it, leaving the man even more confused. Ivar, unsure of what Dantalion was plotting, simply replied that he couldn't imagine what was going through the Demon Lord's mind if being just an old man. Dantalion then proposed an idea, asking Ivar if he would like to become his subordinate. Ivar was caught off guard by the question, unable to believe that a low-ranking demon like him was seriously considering such a thing. He responded that the boy must be joking with him. But Dantalion explained that he was being completely serious, repeating the question once more, asking Ivar to become his subordinate. Unable to contain his emotions, Ivar placed his hand on his face and burst into laughter. Dantalion, seeing the man's reaction, joined in and began laughing as well. During their shared laughter, Ivar remarked that Dantalion must be joking, while emitting a dark purple aura. Dantalion replied that at least now, after everything, Ivar had shown his true self. After the protagonist's provocations, we saw Ivar furious, emanating a dark purple energy. With that, he was ready to proceed with his plan, calling Lepus, who had been hiding nearby in the shadows, closer to them. Ivar grew even angrier when he saw the woman who had betrayed his company approaching them. Meanwhile, Dantalion started making jokes about the situation, saying it had been a long-awaited reunion between the two. Ivar shouted Lepus's name, saying he had wanted to see her and asked if she had forgotten the company's rules, where traders were supposed to pay with their own blood, stating that she would definitely regret her betrayal. She simply responded by repeating one of the phrases he had previously told her. To further her own goals, you should use any means necessary. That's what she had learned from Ivar, and she then explained that Dantalion had promised her a better future than the Elder had. And she said she felt confident because, with that person by her side, she would be able to witness it happen. Because of that, she had no regrets about betraying the Elder's company, not even thinking twice about it. Dantalion, hearing this, tried to irritate the man even more, to which Ivar responded by saying that the idea of a better future was just a joke. He then threatened the two, saying that after the meeting, they would lose everything they had. He only needed to provide the evidence about the black herb, a statement that made Dantalion laugh at him. Seeing this, Ivar wondered why Dantalion was laughing, even considering that he might have gone mad. Dantalion replied that, in fact, he was worried about Ivar. The man, not understanding this response, continued listening to Dantalion, who then pulled a few strands of blonde hair from his pocket. Asking Ivar if he knew what those strands were, the man slowly began to realize his current situation. And Dantalion, laughing, said it wasn't his body that Ivar should be worried about, but something else. Located in the frozen lands far to the north, deep in a cave, where a small girl's body lay frozen. That body was the real Ivar. Hearing Dantalion's threats, Ivar dropped his cane to the ground, unable to believe the information the demon had about him. Trembling with fear, he stared at the boy, wondering how he had learned such confidential information about his true body. Dantalion, laughing in his face, knew this because that world was part of the game he had previously completed, and Ivar Lodbrok was a character in the game known as a vampire who had fallen in love with the main character. In the game, Ivar had been betrayed by the demon lord she served and had sealed herself in an ice coffin to never be used again, living her life while moving her consciousness between her living dolls. Dantalion had been surprised when he first saw that Ivar was completely different from the heroine who appeared in the game. He continued by saying that he was very concerned about the possibility of the lungs of such an adorable young lady being torn out by the monsters of the region. Then he added that all it would take was a small signal for a disaster to occur with that girl. Ivar, eyes wide with fear, wondered how someone had discovered his true identity, as he hadn't told anyone. He said there was no one who could know all of that unless it was himself. Seeing the blonde hair, identical to his own, in Dantalion's hand, Ivar began to panic, unable to believe it all. Before leaving the meeting, Dantalion had taken a few strands of blonde hair from another noblewoman to use against Ivar. But he had never imagined it would be so effective, now only needing a small final push. Lapis, hearing all this, wondered what on earth Dantalion was talking about. But given her former boss's reaction, even if it was confusing, it seemed to be the truth about the Elder. Dantalion then asked the man once again if he would agree to serve him, knowing all of this. Ivar panicked, repeatedly questioning why all of this was happening to him. With a shocked expression, unable to control his emotions, he saw Dantalion's eerie face before him, awaiting his answer. Ivar said there was no chance he would serve someone like the boy, repeating over and over that he hated the situation, unable to believe the corner he was trapped in. A dark purple aura, even more intense, appeared at his feet and began to envelop his entire body until the man was no longer visible. Meanwhile, he screamed to the heavens with such fervor that it even surprised Dantalion. The purple aura began to take on a strange shape, with several tails that then lashed out toward Lepus and Dantalion. With this, he took Lapis hostage, pressing his sharp nails against her throat. He warned that if either of them made any move, she would die. Dantalion, watching Ivar's actions, began to ask why he was doing all of this, but the Elder interrupted him, ordering him to shut up. He warned that if Dantalion took another step forward, he would indeed take Lapis's life, then proposed a deal between them. The Elder demanded that Dantalion release his true body, and if he did, Lapis's life would be spared. He believed that with the life of the woman Dantalion loved in his hands, he had found the demon's greatest weakness. Dantalion had even committed murder for her, stating that Dantalion would have no choice but to accept the offer. Preferably, Ivar would have killed them both right there, but it would be a problem if his true body suffered any harm. And unfortunately, Ivar was almost out of magic, having used most of it in his previous action, leaving him no option but to propose a deal. However, he promised that once he regained his true body, he would definitely kill Dantalion for what he had done. Dantalion responded that he understood the deal the man had proposed and said that if Ivar wanted to kill her, he could go ahead with his plan. This took Ivar by surprise, unable to comprehend the situation as he looked at the boy with a demonic expression on his face. Dantalion told Ivar that he didn't care about Lapis's life, telling him to kill her right there, smiling as he watched. The elder, rolling his eyes in agony over everything he was going through, wondered if he had heard Dantalion correctly. He questioned Dantalion, asking if this wasn't supposed to be a negotiation between them. Dantalion then explained that a negotiation could only happen when both sides were equal, or when one side was significantly stronger. And being someone known as the leader of Konkuska, Dantalion thought Ivar would be capable of understanding something as simple as that. In a panic, Ivar screamed several times for the boy to shut up while threatening Lapis's life. But Dantalion seemed unfazed, simply telling him to go ahead and kill her. He then asked the girl if she actually cared about the possibility of dying right there. She replied by accepting the fact that she would sacrifice herself for the sake of her master. With that, they left Ivar with no leverage, as he tried to understand why those two were having such a conversation. Dantalion approached and said that from the beginning, the elder had misunderstood the situation regarding the plague. He explained that Ivar believed Barbatos was the mastermind behind the disease and that Lapis was merely executing the plan, with Dantalion being nothing more than a pawn in the whole scheme. As he asked Ivar if his reasoning was correct, Dantalion moved closer and the elder finally began to realize the truth. Dantalion revealed that he was, in fact, the one behind everything and Ivar had been completely wrong all along. Unable to believe that he had lost his judgment due to a simple desire for petty revenge. Ivar, hearing this, felt his knees pulling his claws away from Lapis's neck, trembling in a state of panic with no options left. Wondering who this person in front of him truly was, he admitted to himself that he was incapable of defeating the boy, finally realizing who the real demon Lord Dantalion was. Dantalion, seeing the man utterly defeated before him, said there was no need for fear, as he wanted Ivar to work for him. Without changing anything, he could continue being who he had always been. However, he only asked that from time to time, Ivar listened to a few of his requests, with the right to refuse always being clear. And holding the blown strands of hair in his hand and breaking them in half, he informed Ivar that if he chose to refuse, something bad would happen. He then made his first request, which he whispered into Ivar's ears so that only the two of them knew what it was about. Upon hearing this, Ivar seemed deeply displeased with what he had heard, but Dantalion reminded him that they needed to return to the trial. He also revealed that he hadn't been the one to spread the plague, informing Ivar that he would leave the rest to him. Marbas in the main hall looked at his pocket watch, realizing it was time to resume the trial. Ivar returned in silence to the room while everyone watched him. Marbas asked how things were at his headquarters, saying he wanted to continue with Walpurgis Night. Ivar responded despondent that he had no objections. Barbatos, seeing the man so downcast, asked what was wrong with him, laughing in his face. She then asked if the destruction of his castle had also shattered the courage he had shown just moments earlier. Marbas interrupted Barbatos, who complied with his decision, now waiting for the final person to return, which was Dantalion. He entered the hall shortly after, accompanied by Lapis. Paimon grew angry just looking at the demon, and Marbas took the opportunity to resume the meeting now that everyone had finally returned. Paimon said she was relieved that Dantalion hadn't tried to flee from his judgment. He replied by saying that he had already told her he had only gone to get some fresh air. Paimon, impatient, asked Ivar to present the evidence that the man stood still in the hall, unmoving. Growing irritated, Paimon asked him to hurry, but Ivar then said that he actually had no evidence of anything. This caught Paimon and everyone else by surprise. She asked Ivar what he had just said. Ivar informed everyone that to begin with, there had never been any evidence. He admitted that everything Lady Paimon had said was simply a lie. Everyone began watching Ivar as he spoke while Paimon exploded with rage. Paimon, upon hearing this, asked Ivar to repeat his words, unable to believe what she was hearing. As he started to repeat everything again, Paimon interrupted him, saying she had finally understood that if he wanted to die so badly, she would kill him herself. Marbas stepped in between them, trying to prevent Paimon from advancing, reminding her that this was the sacred night of Walpurgis. Reluctantly, Paimon decided to respect the host's authority, asking for someone to summon Torkel, her personal consultant from Konkuska. Torkel, who had been watching everything from nearby, asked if she could call for him, drawing the attention of everyone present in the center of the room. Dantalion, upon seeing the goblin, asked who he was but didn't give it much thought, as a mere servant couldn't do much in that situation. For Paimon and Ivar, it seemed like the end. Torkel, observing his master, sensed that something wasn't right and became concerned about what had happened to Lord Ivar. Paimon, furious, shouted at him, saying he had informed her that Dantalion was the one who spread the plague without a doubt. Torkel, hearing this, agreed with Paimon's words. But then he explained that, in truth, the entire story about Dantalion spreading the plague was a lie he had created himself. Ivar was shocked by the words of his loyal servant, as was everyone else present at the meeting. Paimon, hearing this, asked if it was something Ivar had told him to say, not fully understanding the situation. But Torkel affirmed that he had received no orders from anyone and had orchestrated everything on his own. The woman became furious once again, stating that he couldn't have done something like that, as they had known each other for so long. Knowing who Torkel truly was, she wasn't asking this of a mere employee, but of a long-time friend. She questioned him once more, asking who was really in charge of all of this. Without hesitation, the goblin once again took full responsibility for everything, saying he had done it all by himself. Wanting to obtain the black herb that Lord Dantalion possessed, and since he couldn't do it alone, he decided to use someone else to achieve his goal, choosing either Lady Payman or Lord Ivar. He went on to say that he had simply taken advantage of their benevolence and the power of Lord Ivar. Dantalion was shocked by what the goblin had done, taking responsibility on behalf of Ivar and Payman. Marbas, hearing this, asked Torkel if he understood the gravity of his crimes in using a demon lord to fulfill his selfish desires. The goblin replied that he was fully aware of the consequences, but now that his plan had failed, there was nothing left for him to do. If there was any fault that could be attributed to Lady Payman, it was that she had placed her trust in an old fool like him. Even without fully understanding what had happened to his master, he pulled a knife from his clothing. Deciding to trust Ivar to resolve everything later, this was the last thing he could do for his companion. He then pointed the knife at himself, saying he would pay for it all with his life, slitting his own throat. As everyone was shocked by the goblin's death, Payman couldn't believe that her friend lay dead before her. She cried out that she hadn't called him there for this to happen. Some people approached her asking if she was okay, while she knelt on the ground drained of strength. Lord Marbas instructed them to take her to another room. Marbatos, watching everything, began laughing at Payman, saying that the wretched woman had only gotten what she deserved. She mockingly asked why Payman wasn't taking her precious goblin's body with her to give it a proper kick. Marbas ordered Barbatos to be quiet again, and she complied while Dantalion approached Torkel's body. Knowing that the goblin had done all of this to protect Ivar and Payman, sacrificing his own life, he had now turned both of them into mere victims of the situation, something truly admirable. Ivar trying to hold back his tears, knowing it was all his fault, and Dantalion placing his hand over his chest, reflecting on what the goblin had done, showing great respect for his determination. Marbas approached Dantalion, explaining that he would personally ensure that Payman paid for when it happened. But before he could finish his thought, Dantalion interrupted the host, saying that there was no need for any of that. He explained that Lady Payman had been manipulated, and now that Torkel was dead, there was no one left to be held accountable. Marbas, admiring Dantalion's stance throughout the situation, respected his attitude, and his affinity with the young demon lord increased by 20 points. Respecting the boy now, Marbas added that the grace Dantalion had shown during this well-purchased night would be remembered for a long time. With everything concluded, there was no need to continue the judgment with a majority vote, as much had happened that night, finally bringing the meeting to an end. He informed everyone that he would serve drinks for the occasion. Barbatos, surprised by his generosity, said she wouldn't hesitate to ask for some alcohol. She then called Dantalion to join her so the two could drink together. Dantalion, realizing he had truly gained Barbatos' admiration, also noticed that she was quite a nuisance. With all the nobles and demon lords dancing and drinking to celebrate the sacred night, Ivar appeared, holding Torkel's body in his arms, apologizing to the goblin for their loss in battle that day. He promised that one day he would repay his friend for what he had done. After drinking heavily with Barbatos, Dantalion stepped out onto the balcony of the building alone, observing the city in the distance. He wondered how Barbatos could drink so much alcohol without getting sick, questioning if all demon lords were like that. He noticed that he himself was feeling a bit dizzy after all the drinking. Pausing for a moment, he began reflecting on all the events he had witnessed since being reincarnated into the world of Dungeon Assault. A lot happened, and remembering his useless father, he said he was having the best time of his life. Lapis arrived, finding Dantalion, and as he looked at her, he remarked that she knew him very well. She scolded him, saying that everything he had done was incredibly irresponsible, and questioned him about forgiving Lady Payman. She asked if it was really okay to leave the root of a problem like that, telling him he had let a very problematic opponent escape. Dantalion was surprised that Lapis was reprimanding him, asking her to cut him some slack as he was very tired that day. The girl continued to stare at him, making Dantalion ask what had happened. He explained that Payman wasn't really a problem because his thoughts extended far beyond anyone else's in that world, with grand plans in place. He assured her that she need not worry, as like he had promised, he would show her a vision she had never seen before. She then said she understood, surprising Dantalion with her sudden obedience. Normally, the girl who would scold the demon pulled him close to her and stole a kiss from him. Embarrassed by the situation, he asked her what that was all about. She replied that she was aware of Dantalion's true nature, which he didn't quite understand. Blushing with embarrassment, he began to explain that he had only become her fiancé for his own benefit. He even admitted that you would let her die, like in the situation with Ivar, just to make his plans work as he desired. But Lapis responded that she already knew all of that, smiling for the first time, explaining that she believed in Dantalion. Understanding the situation better now, he grabbed Lapis in his arms and commented that he had never seen her smile before kissing the girl again. There are some moments from the past that you simply can't change. A woman appeared holding a knife, threatening two small girls who seemed to have already been beaten quite badly. Dantalion, standing beside his father, watched the sea, which seemed to be a memory from the past. The boy pleaded with his father to end his relationship with the woman, but his father said he wouldn't do that, ordering his son not to refer to her as that woman. Dantalion refused, as the person was threatening to kill two people just because they had different mothers, completely out of control. He asked his father who he would choose between his family and that woman, and with a macabre smile, his father said he loved her. He told his son that he was always too negative and that it wouldn't hurt to think a bit more positively. Dantalion, unable to believe what his father was saying, became inconsolable and began to cry, saying he would never forgive him. The scene shifted, and we saw Lapis slap the boy across the face in a crowded square, with many people witnessing the scene. They were shocked by the girl's violence, and afterward, she remarked that she hadn't expected His Highness to be so needy. Dantalion cursed Lapis, calling her a wretch, and asked how she dared, as a mere servant, to raise her hand against her lord. Still in front of everyone, Dantalion asked Lapis if she understood the consequences of her actions. She replied that she did, while they stared at each other with a crowd gathered around them. Because of that, Dantalion decided to dismiss Lapis for his service. 2 hours pass, and we see Dantalion in his new house in Niflheim. explaining to someone the reason for his separation from Lapis. He then asked why Barbatos was there, to which she replied that the most famous couple in the demon world had just broken up. Clearly, she wanted to know more about what happened. Dantalion said that it had only been 2 hours since the breakup, yet rumors had already spread, and he wasn't in the mood to talk about it with anyone. Barbatos laughed at his response, calling him cold, saying she had come all that way just to hear what her junior had to say. Dantalion couldn't ignore her calling him junior, but he remained silent as she continued. She remarked that normally, touching a demon lord was punishable by death, yet the half-blood girl had dared to do so. She then asked Dantalion what the hell he had done afterward. Dantalion told her to stop meddling in his life and suggested she leave. Barbatos insisted that he shouldn't take things so seriously, saying she liked him and, as a senior, had a duty to look after her juniors. She told him not to dwell on it too much, saying there were plenty of other women out there. She added that everyone would soon forget the fact that he had been with a half-blood, calling him inexperienced. Barbatos, who had lived for over 500 years, claimed she knew more about love than anyone else. She suggested that if Dantalion followed her advice, even the nobles would respect him without him having to lift a finger. Seeing he was intrigued, Barbatos urged him to listen to the advice of his senior. Curious, she then asked what happened. Dantalion decided to explain that about a month ago, an older woman visited them. Barbatos became curious about this older woman, and Dantalion continued, explaining that the woman claimed to be Lapis' mother. As far as he knew, Lapis had been an orphan since birth, and he asked the woman where she had abandoned Lapis and fled. With tears in her eyes, the woman explained that she had been expelled from the village right after giving birth to Lapis. She confessed that not a day had passed since then without thinking about her daughter, and that she had been switching for her ever since. Wiping away her tears, the woman spoke about how she had heard rumors of Lapis, but she was interrupted by Dantalion, who took her to see her daughter. The woman thanked the merciful demon lord, feeling truly honored. At that moment, Lapis suddenly entered the room, informing them of a letter that had just arrived, which she wanted to deliver to Dantalion. Seizing the moment, Dantalion asked if she knew the woman standing beside him. Lapis stared at the woman in complete silence, while Dantalion mentioned that he too was surprised by her sudden appearance. Feeling a bit awkward, the woman tried to say her daughter's name, but Lapis stared at her with a cold expression, clutching her fist as if she were angry. Dantalion noticed this tension and decided to ask again, with a more serious tone, if the woman was truly Lapis' mother. He warned that lying in front of a demon lord meant instant death, and she needed to be sure that Lapis was really her daughter. The woman panicked, reaffirming that she was indeed Lapis' mother. Dantalion then asked why she had only come looking for her daughter now. She said she had always wanted to find Lapis, but had been fighting to survive every day. Dantalion, hearing this, asked if she had been too busy to look for Lapis before. She replied that her daughter had only been a child, and that some misunderstandings might have occurred, but things would be different now. She affirmed that from now on, she would talk properly with Lapis, and that instead of dwelling on the past, they should look toward the future together. This caused Dantalion to land a solid punch on her face, smashing it in. Blood splattered from the blow, and Dantalion, furious, glared at the woman, telling her she had no right to resolve the past on her own. He asked if she didn't care about what Lapis had been through all this time before delivering another hook to her face. But now that her daughter had become someone important, she decided to show up and enjoy the comfortable life finally. He then stomped on the elderly woman's head, who was too weak to fight back, pressing her into the ground as she screamed in pain. He declared that Lapis was the woman he loved, and he would never allow anyone to hurt her again, no matter who they were. Lapis interrupted his speech, asking His Highness to stop what he was doing, but he refused, continuing to say that he could tell just by looking at the old woman's face that she resented Lapis, and that now she wanted to play the role of a mother, but in truth, she was planning to leech off Lapis' life. The woman screamed in agony, terrified for her life, as she watched Dantalion hold a sword, ready to strike her down right there. But her daughter interrupted, stepping between them and stopping Dantalion from going through with it. He asked Lapis why she was stopping him, as she felt the same way, with the person who had ruined her life still alive and indifferent to everything. Lapis responded that it wasn't necessary for His Highness to dirty his hands over something like this. So Dantalion ordered her to hire mercenaries immediately, which seemed to irritate Lapis, who interrupted him. She told him he didn't know anything about her, while her affinity with him plummeted. Seeing the situation, he asked Lapis why she was so angry with him, saying that everything he had done was for her own good. But Lapis, without answering him, turned her back and walked away after her mother. Barbatos, having just heard the whole story, listened as Dantalion asked where he had gone wrong in the situation, leaving her intrigued. She asked him if he was out of his mind, unable to see what he had done. He replied that the person who had ruined Lapis' life was right in front of him, thinking he was being perfectly reasonable. Barbatos, hearing this, realized that her hopes of him being a promising newcomer had vanished, as Dantalion was clearly a complete psychopath. This prompted Dantalion to ask, without caring, if she wasn't supposed to be the one who had solved anything related to love. With a more irritated tone, she told Dantalion to listen to her, pointing out that he had just tried to kill Lapis' biological mother right in front of her. He countered her argument, saying that if someone was trash who deserved to die, then someone should clearly kill him. Hearing this, Barbatos remarked that she felt sorry for the half-blood, and that if she had been in that situation, she would have cut Dantalion's balls off on the spot. Dantalion asked which side she was really on, but Barbatos tried to ignore it and instead asked what happened afterward. He didn't immediately understand what she meant, and Barbatos clarified that the event had happened a month ago, asking what had transpired since then. Upon hearing this, Dantalion glanced at Barbatos' legs, which she noticed, asking where he was looking. She remarked that wasn't free and that he'd have to pay for it. Changing the subject, Dantalion informed her that he was too tired at the moment. If she wanted him to talk more, she have to give him a good reason. Having just ended his relationship a few hours ago, he wasn't in the mood to chat. Barbatos, still intrigued by the story, said it was fine if he just kept looking while asking him to continue talking. He resumed by explaining that before all of that, when Lapis handed him a letter, he extended his hand and gave it to Barbatos. In the letter, it was written that he was a target, and in 10 days, 2,000 soldiers would attack his castle. Barbatos, hearing about the threat letter Dantalion received, seemed even more interested in the matter. He explained to her that in reality, the letter seemed more like a warning than a threat. She didn't quite understand and asked the boy what the difference was between a threat and a warning, sipping her wine with a smile. Dantalion asked her to take a closer look. Though it was a text of only 2 sentences, there were several hidden clues within it. Barbatos, curious, poured herself more alcohol and asked about those clues. Dantalion then explained that the first sentence said, "You are a target," and that it could also be interpreted as, "I am not your enemy." The wording was too gentle for it to be just a threat, implying something more was hidden. He began trying to understand who had sent the letter and what their intentions were. Barbatos, hearing this, commented that it was an interesting interpretation, asking for more details. He explained that the writer was likely someone from a high social class, a person who had received a good education. A slant of the writing in the letter also suggested that the person was left-handed or ambidextrous, which impressed Barbatos as she listened intently. Dantalion remarked that handwriting is a reflection of a person's life, deducing that the individual who sent the letter was someone of high rank and good standing. Barbatos, hearing this, asked him to show her the letter again. She took the letter in her hands and began analyzing it. She couldn't understand how he had figured all of that out just by looking. Dantalion responded, asking if she didn't have eyes in her head, telling her to focus on the numbers written in the letter. Between the first 2 and the 0, there was a comma, something most people didn't bother with when writing. But this particular person had this habit, which could be used to deduce that they worked with money or dealt with large numbers. Probably someone accustomed to working with financial documents and accounting records. With the possibility of them being a chamberlain of some noble, this made Barbatos realize that Dantalion was indeed quite clever. Dantalion, hearing her compliment, said it was still too early to be impressed, as there were 5 more secrets hidden in the letter. But for now, that was all he'd reveal, as it wouldn't be fun to disclose all the secrets at once. Barbatos, frustrated, told him to stop teasing her like that, calling him a pervert. Changing the subject, she commented that in any case, the person was possibly a merchant, to which he replied that it seemed likely. With that, she decided to help her solve the mystery, informing him that she would find the person who had written the letter. Dantalion asked if that was even possible. Barbatos, emanating a sinister aura, asked him who he thought she was while biting her finger to cast a blood magic spell. Touching the letter with her bleeding finger, she used a spell called Thanatos Repentance. As a demon lord, she commanded the letter to fly directly to its writer. The letter was then consumed by blue flames, and from its ashes, a squeaking bat appeared. Barbatos grabbed the creature by the head with her right hand, explaining that the bat would fly to whoever had written the letter, and once it reached the person, she would know who they were, piquing Dantalion's interest. The girl opened the window and released the bat, saying that Dantalion now was her favor. Dantalion, watching the scene, commented that he understood how amazing she was, but he also questioned how long it would take for this to happen. He said that since she was the great Barbatos, surely the person would be found quickly. This irritated Barbatos a little, as she explained that if the person were nearby, it could act immediately. She told him to be grateful that they ever discovered who the writer was. She challenged Dantalion, stating that her back was an absolute power, unlike his deduction, and they would see if his guess was correct. Barbatos continued, asking again about the merchant, recalling what they had been discussing before the letter. Dantalion, already suspecting something, remarked that the person could be a merchant with whom he was quite familiar. If his suspicions were correct, Dantalion explained that they could catch the culprit even faster. Barbatos asked how. He reiterated that his suspicion was that the person was a merchant close to him. Time passed, and now they were in one of Kumkuska's headquarters in Niflheim. Ever appeared, stating that he hadn't written any letter, and Dantalion tried to explain that he really wanted to believe him. But the fact remained that Ivar had a history of attacks against him. Trembling with fear, Ivar replied that he absolutely had no intention of challenging his highness. Dantalion, hearing this, said that while he believed in the man's capabilities, he still couldn't trust him as a person. Ivar, uneasy, asked how he could earn Dantalion's trust. Dantalion responded, saying that if Ivar did a few more favors for him, everything would be fine. The elder asked what he meant by favors, and Dantalion explained that he was interested in hiring some mercenaries, but only the best of the best would be allowed, and he ordered Ivar to gather 3,000 men within 2 days. Our video ends here. If you want a continuation, subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye-bye.